Hope my screen is visible to everyone. Great. Okay. So I'm open to questions if you have any with respect to Microsoft Azure storage services that we completed yesterday, with respect to the topics that we discussed, the hands-on lab that we did, as well as anything that we could not do. However, you did try it yourself and you have certain inputs, or you want to provide, or you want to share some experience of yours, as well as if you have any questions with respect to the activities that you did, this is the opportunity to ask question.
Raghu, hello.
Yes, Naeem.
Actually, yesterday, actually, I have some storage accounts. I mean, my client storage account accesses, but they have given me the folder level access. I mean, storage, I mean, account level access, but I couldn't see I couldn't able to access the remaining folders. Only I can access the only one folder.
One folder, you mean to say one container?
Yeah. Not, I'm talking about file shares, right? Sorry. This is file about
File
file
share.
share.
Okay.
They have
So
given me this access to this container level, I mean file share level, but they are right. Sorry, we have created some file shares, 4 file shares, but they have given one file share access. But remaining file shares I couldn't able to access. I mean,
so you're not able to access remaining file shares because you've not been granted.
I need to go some. I mean, I will ask you later. I will just check whether I have. Actually, I have seen this. I mean, you can see, right? Group level access they have given, I guess, in the share
Yeah,
folders.
that's okay. Understand the concept here. So this is file share. I've got this file share, right? Now, file share has its own access control feature. Now, if there are 12 file shares here and you only have access to one file share, or when you navigate to the screen, you only see one file share, it is because for the remaining 11 file shares, you have not been added here. They have not given you reader access or any sort of access to the file share. That's one thing. Now,
may I know how can I see this access here? Whether I'm having access to this file share or not?
Whether you have access to this file share or not.
Yeah.
See, if you don't have access to a service, you will not see that service at all, right? There are two behaviors. First, if you don't have access to a service, either that service will not be displayed, or if that service is displayed, when you double click on the service, it will give you an error stating that you don't have sufficient access. Okay. These are the two possible behaviors. If it is the first behavior where the service is not displayed, then there is absolutely nothing you can do. However, if it is the second behavior, then you can definitely click on that service. You can go to check access over here, and it will show you the level of access that has been granted to all the identities on this service, right? So you can provide the name, whosoever has access. Let's say I'll say Farhan, right? And I want to check whether Farhan has access to this resource or not. So it will quickly check and tell that yes, Farhan has got owner level access to this resource. So basically, Farhan basically has access at subscription level. He has subscription owner access, and since he has subscription owner access, automatically Farhan is inheriting this access. I'm owner access on this resource also. That's one way of checking it. The other way of checking your level of access is you click on your name on the top right hand corner, then you click on these three dots and it says my permissions. Click on your permissions and it will exactly show you the level of permissions that you have here. For example, it shows me that the subscription Azure Pass sponsorship, I'm an administrator of that subscription. Now, since I'm an administrator, I have super admin access to everything. That's how you can check the level of access that has been granted to your identity, as well as from the resource, whether you have access to that resource or not. Okay. Then comes the other thing that is special to file share, which is, let's say this is my file share. In this file share, let's say I create a couple of folders also. I'm saying I create a lot of, I add a directory. I add I add a lot of data. Let's say I create a directory with the name Farhan. Right? This directory is created. Now I keep some data inside Farhan. I upload some data inside this directory. It's already exists. Okay, sorry. I need to go inside the directory first. Yeah. Now here I can add data, upload data. Oh. So let's say I'm uploading the data inside this directory, right? Now inside Farhan directory, I have this document. I have this Linux security engineer job description with me. Okay. Now, when it comes to integration, and I'm sure since it's a production environment, your file shares are either configured with Microsoft Entra domain service or they are integrated with Active Directory domain service. The possibility goes here, Active Directory domain service. So after you enable the integration, you can set shared level permissions. So basically that Farhan share, the folder, the directory Farhan, I can enable access to that share. So I will enable this permission. I'm saying enable permission for all authenticated users in group. And after that, I will navigate to these two roles, which is here. These two roles, which is uh, yeah, storage data SMB share reader and storage data SMB shared contributor. Now, your management can decide to give you read-only access to certain folders. For example, HR folder. HR folder contains uh, HR policies, leave policies, and whatnot. So your management will decide to give all the employees read-only access to HR folder and contributor level access to HR itself on that folder so that HR can actually upload and delete data into that folder or directory. That is done from here. So you basically select for example, if I want to grant read-only access to that folder, I will select storage file data SMB shared reader, click next, and then I will select your member. You don't happen to be an identity in my directory, but let's assume that you are Farhan. I will I will select your identity, and this way I'm granting you storage file data SMB share reader. So you will have reader level access to file share. Then I will go to that specific folder because I have done Active Directory domain services integration. I will now have access to NTFS permissions. I'll go to that folder inside my system. I'm saying inside, on my laptop because I will have this file share configured on my laptop also, added as a network drive on my laptop as an admin. So then I will go to that folder, right click on it, go to properties, and then I will provide you specific access. I'm saying I will either make you administrator and reader by default you are there. So by default, you're going to be a reader to the entire file share. But for any directory or folder that I want you to be an administrator of, then I will go to that folder. It is like this. For example, this folder I want you to be an administrator of. So I will go inside the file share on my system, then go to properties, and in the properties I'll navigate to security, and then I click on edit, and I add you as a user here because this system is is a member of my domain in a production environment. So I will just select your user, and then after selecting your user, I have these permissions like full control, modify, read and execute. So I will allow certain permissions over here. This is how I will manage my file share Azure file share for my employees. So this is the similar configuration that is probably have been granted to your identity, wherein you don't have access to certain file shares. You have access to a file share, but you don't have access to certain folders. You have access to folder, but you don't maintain admin access to those folders. That's how the configuration is actually. Make sense?
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I understand. Thank you. But one more question, like, see, we are
Hmm.
having 3 or 4 folders, for example, in a file share. Can
Hmm.
we get a overall file share? I mean, access to overall folders, whatever being created in this file share at a one
Yeah.
time. At what stage we required to say, like, storage account stage, or we required to get access, or what?
No, no. See, it depends. If you will have access at storage account level, which is a container for file share, automatically you will maintain access to the file share. However, any storage account that has a file share will not be granted access to identities at storage account level. That's how you bifurcate. See, when you create a storage account, any service that you will provision in Azure, there is a planning that goes in the backend before you provision that service. So whosoever is provisioning the service is the person who executes that planning. Then there are people who plan it. So somebody will plan, okay, let's create a file share in Azure that we will use to share our common policies with our employees, or some common information with our vendors or partners. So this is the planning. Now, to execute this plan, a service request will be created. That request comes to the admin or the L2 or L3 person, the one who is an expert in file share. That person will create the file share. When that person creates the file share, that person will not create a file share in an existing storage account to which multiple people have administrative access of. That person will create a separate storage account, tag it to that business unit from whom that request has come from, so that billing and chargeback can happen. And later on, that person will create the file share, will also seek information from the requester that who needs to be granted as admin of this file share, and who all will be granted as user access. So that information will come from that requester itself, that okay, these are 2 people, please make them admin of this file share, and these are 20 people, please give them read-only access to this file share. That's how the request comes for file share. And accordingly, you will work on that request and create the file share. And then you become one of those 20 members who were granted read-only access to the file share. Make sense?
Yeah, yes.
All right. Any other question, guys?
Actually, I want to show you the, the case, but yeah, I got
So
somewhat,
you
but
can't show it to me on a recorded session. If
like,
you are willing to share any data, we can do it offline, 101.
yeah, correct.
Okay.
Okay, okay, okay.
Great. Any other participant? So, guys, uh, as a thumb rule, I may not have worked with a service, but the general process or the fundamentals remain the same. For example, I do not work with Synapse Analytics, but I at least know that it's a analytics service which integrates with Power BI, Tableau, and other analysis engines. And if it is about permissions, if it is about access of that service, the process will remain the same. I will check the container of that service. He will either grant access at the container level. If that service supports resource level access, for example, storage account, it supports resource level access, which is storage account is a container service. It contains multiple services, multiple storage services. If I grant somebody access over here on this blade, access control, and if I grant reader access, the person will by default get read-only access to all the storage services here. So when I create my storage account, it will not happen that I will only have one storage account. that will have all the data storage services configured in it. No, you will find storage accounts which are exclusively provisioned for file share or for tables and queues or for containers. And that is why Microsoft has started asking you this question that, okay, you want to create a storage account. Tell us what is the primary service that you intend to keep here. That's why Microsoft is asking you this question, primary service question, so that Microsoft can also show you only those options in the dashboard which you need, instead of giving you access to multiple options that you may not need to have access to and unnecessarily confuse you or create a probability of any accidental configuration. That is why we have role based access control in Azure, or organizations follow the principle of least privilege, wherein people are given access to the service that they need to work with, not to everything that they have nothing to do with. And this is the fundamental principle of security also. I am security, that people should be granted lowest possible access based on their job role and responsibilities. That access also has to be proctored with the help of PIM. That access should not be permanent, it should be time bound, and that access must be reviewed on regular basis, which is identity lifecycle management. So whether you work with Azure, AWS, GCP, Alibaba, Oracle, IBM, and any other cloud, the core principles will remain the same. That is why people who are cybersecurity practitioners, it doesn't take them long to understand a new product. All they need to see is UI of that product and how that product OEM is putting together terminologies. As I said, in Azure, we call it RBAC. In AWS, we call it IAM policies. In GCP cloud, we call it principle. That's all you need to know. The terminology difference that they use to identify the product or identify a specific configuration. And it will not take much time to comprehend or master if you are really interested in exploring your horizon, learning outside of Azure, learning multiple cloud, and become somebody who is irreplaceable, who is not easily replaceable in the company. Because if that person is replaced, probably 5 6 people needs to be hired, or it will have an immediate impact on the project. So that's what every technology person needs to aspire to become. There is life outside work. I'm not saying that invest heavily into this initiative. There is life outside work. Probably I sometimes I feel that I was too focused on my career, that and by virtue of which I was able to achieve at a very early age what I always wanted to do. But then I sacrificed some, critical moments of my life also. So don't rush, but don't be lenient also. Strike a balance in life. Try and achieve things as they come along to you, which is in, synchronization with your career objectives. So when it comes to Microsoft Entra ID, this service will continue to excite you all the time, will continue to surprise you, because it's a cloud IAM service, and Microsoft is notorious to not include all the capabilities in one go. Microsoft keeps on adding them in bits and pieces. So today they will add one capability. Day after tomorrow they will add one more. Then they will announce something. By the time something that was announced a month ago will be added. So Microsoft will keep you engaged. That's how Microsoft Cloud is designed. You will not get any bandwidth wherein you will think that today I know everything about this service. The moment you say it, there is something that is added which you're not aware of. So be a practitioner, not a subject matter expert. I never call myself an SME on any technology. Technology that I know in depth of, I call myself a practitioner. That I practice this technology. I've been practicing this technology for the last 10, 15 years, and I know about this technology. I have good comfort level. Anything that I don't know, I will not take much time to learn and and then work on it. That's how I go about it. It would be I'd say it would be foolish to say that you are an expert. Nobody is an expert in this world. You cannot be an expert of a technology. Okay. So that's about it. So you basically need to talk about that your intention of why are you creating the storage account service, whether the intention is to use file share, whether the intention is to use table and queues, whether the intention is to use Azure Data Lake storage or blob storage. When you say blob storage, then it will ask you further questions. Okay, why do you want to use blob storage? The moment you say other, it will give you access to all the services. But if you specifically tell them that I want this, then you only get access to that service in storage account. And that way you will be sorted out. If you say that I want to use it for files, then it will not even ask you a second question. It knows that it only needs to provide you file share access in that storage account. So definitely you will not be able to provision any other storage service in that storage account. That's how Microsoft is improving. Earlier, this option was not there. Customers would create a storage account, and by virtue of that storage account, they would get everything, all the capabilities under data storage. Okay. Great. So if there are no more questions, let's get started with the topic that we need to cover today, which is Azure Compute Service that we almost started yesterday. And I did talk about Azure Virtual Machines. And I also shared the recorded session on Azure Virtual Machines along with Microsoft Azure documentation. So let's go through the Azure Virtual Machine services. Raghuveer. All right, guys, while I'm checking, I want all of you to read this documentation. Let's read about virtual machines in Azure. What are virtual machines? What are the value proposition? Why do we need to use a virtual machine? Why it is needed? How do we provision a virtual machine? I'm saying just go through this documentation from top to bottom while I. All right. Is my screen visible to everyone? Yes, Raghu. Great. Let's get started. So guys, as I said, when it comes to compute service, there are multiple services which form compute category for Microsoft Azure. And one of the most widely used, most universal service is virtual machines. Most of the customers, they start with virtual machines. They provision virtual machines in cloud. They install applications on those virtual machines, deploy workloads, and they primarily make use of those virtual machines for their business activities. You also have a service with the name Virtual Machine Scale Sets. It is the same virtual machine service with additional capability. With this service in place, you can basically deploy a highly scalable application with some basic infrastructure to begin with. Let's say you deploy your application infrastructure with two virtual machines to begin with, and then you will configure the scale set policy. The policy will be configured to monitor the virtual machine resource utilization, application utilization, and based on the threshold in the policy, for example, let's say when the virtual machine resource utilization, CPU and memory goes beyond 90%, then the policy will be configured to provision additional virtual machines to accommodate that additional load or to ease out the load on existing virtual machines and settle it, balance it with additional virtual machines so that your application runs smoothly. That's what it does. So it's a great service, and with this service in place, you can deploy applications in Azure with unpredictable, uh, unpredictable, performance, or you can say unpredictable number of user situation. For example, e-commerce websites, there they can always predict a typical number of customers or hits on their website on any specific day. But when they are running campaigns, they can't just predict. Sometimes they get more than expected customers purchasing products from their portal. Sometimes they get underreporting also. So it all depends. So when things are not sure, when you want to ensure high availability, when business or your website is critical to your business, you can go with virtual machine skill sets. App services falls under platform as a service category. It is the same virtual machine, however, you don't manage it. Microsoft manages the virtual machine. It manages the runtime. It manages the availability. It manages the performance. It manages the security. It manages the patches, maintenance, updates. That is done by Microsoft. All you manage is access to that virtual machine via via certain solutions that Microsoft provides as part of app services, and then the data that your application processes, creates, or stores. So that's platform as a service. Function is serverless. It's an example of serverless service wherein infrastructure is built based on event. So it's like you have your application stored into a storage. Whenever there is an event that occurs on your application, whenever there is a customer who access your application, the resources, compute resources are allocated at runtime. Once that event is done, once that action is finished, then the compute resources are deallocated. This is known as serverless computing or serverless technology. Container services, we primarily use containers for hosting applications, applications which have small modules like microservices. So we containerize them. And when you have thousands of containers, the management becomes tedious. So to manage those containers in an efficient manner, we use container orchestration service, which in Microsoft Azure platform is known as Azure Kubernetes Service. In short, AKS. And Kubernetes is known as Kubernetes is also known as K8, K8 in short. So it's a container orchestration service for managing large number of containers. So these are some of the compute services in Microsoft Azure Cloud Platform. Our focus is on virtual machine. So we'll talk about virtual machine. Now, when it comes to virtual machine, they come in various variety and sizes in Microsoft Azure. There is no one variety here. There are multiple varieties, multiple sizes, and they are suitable for a specific business requirement, depending on how critical your workloads are, what kind of performance requirements are there, how much you're ready to pay for those performance and security. Basis on those factors, you basically pick and choose one of the virtual machine type and size. So when it comes to type, we have 5 types of virtual machine, 6 types of virtual machine basically now, which is general purpose. Now, as the name suggests, general purpose, this is the most widely used virtual machine series. Most of the customers start with general purpose virtual machine. You can see a couple of sizes there. We call them series like B series, D series, uh, A series. There are multiple series in general purpose, and they are primarily suitable for testing and development, small to medium businesses, and low to medium traffic web servers. As I said, most of the customers start with general purpose when they are not 100% sure of the performance patterns of their applications, which they are going to host in Azure. Then we have compute optimized. So general purpose has balanced CPU to memory ratio. I'm saying there's a balanced ratio like 2 CPU core, 4 GB RAM, 4 CPU core, 8 GB RAM, 8 CPU core, 16 GB RAM. So for each CPU core, there is 2 gigabyte of RAM in general purpose. Then comes compute optimized. Compute optimized basically means that this virtual machine is primarily meant for those applications which requires high processing, more processing capability than memory. That is where compute optimized comes into the picture. It is high CPU to memory ratio. It doesn't mean that you will have 20 CPU and 10 GB RAM. No, the minimum hardware architecture mandates that for each CPU core, there has to be a minimum of 1 GB RAM. A minimum of 1 and 1, 1.5 GB of RAM has to be there. So in this scenario, you will have higher CPU to memory ratio, and this is primarily meant for good medium traffic web servers, network appliances, batch processes, and application servers. Then comes memory optimized type. In this type, it has high memory to CPU ratio, which means memory will be higher as compared to CPU. So with two CPU cores, two virtual CPU cores, you can get up to 16 gigabyte of RAM instead of 4, which is in general purpose. It's high memory to CPU ratio. What this is good for? This is good for applications which requires more memory, wherein there is a lot of memory requirements are there. For example, databases. Databases requires a lot of memory in order to process. In fact, we have a database from SAP, which is SAP HANA. It's an in-memory database. It runs inside the memory, inside the RAM itself. So it requires higher memory to CPU ratio. And in Microsoft Azure, you can get virtual machine sizes, which is up to, I would say, almost 512 or 512 virtual CPU cores and up to 16 terabyte of RAM. That's the size that you can get. Then comes storage optimized, a virtual machine that supports multiple disks, that supports more disk than other virtual machines, and it provides high CPU, sorry, it provides high input outputs, high read write capability, and it's storage optimized. So it provides high disk throughput, and definitely you will use premium disk here so that you get higher read write request per second. And this is primarily ideal for big data, SQL, NoSQL databases, data warehousing, and large transactional databases. Then we have another type of virtual machine, which is primarily meant for graphics, gaming, GPU optimized. It basically provides you heavy graphics rendering and video editing capabilities. So professional photographers, media, companies which are into media and news, as well as filmmakers, if they want to use cloud capabilities, they basically go with GPU optimized virtual machines. You can see the series, which is NC, ND, NV. So whenever you see a virtual machine series starts with N, remember that it's GPU optimized. If it is L, it is storage optimized. If it is E and M, it is memory optimized. If it is D and B, it's general purpose. Compute optimized have F. So these are the letters which quickly tell you that, okay, it's a compute optimized virtual machine, it's a storage optimized or GPU optimized. High performance compute is a higher configuration of virtual machines which runs on state of the art infrastructure, latest, let's say Intel processors with hyper threading enabled. So they are fastest and most powerful CPU virtual machines with optional high throughput network interfaces. So we typically don't use high performance compute, GPU, or storage optimized virtual machine. Uh, Most of the customers, they typically go with general purpose, compute optimized, and memory optimized based on their business requirements. Unless they explicitly need a specific type of virtual machine or they have a specific type of application requiring that virtual machine. So these are my virtual machine sizes in Microsoft Azure. Any question on this? Suraj, if you're there, I see a message from Farhan that he is still awaiting your email address, your Outlook email address. Suraj, are you there? I see you in the session. All right, let's move on. Now, this is the architecture of a virtual machine in Microsoft Azure. Look at this image carefully. This will help you to understand how virtual machine service is being provided from Microsoft Azure data center. What are building blocks of a virtual machine, or what are other dependent services that virtual machine service interacts with or depends on, and you will need those services in place before you start to build your first virtual machine. That's what this image talks about. So this basically shows you a virtual machine architecture in Microsoft Azure. Now you would understand why did we, have this training order, in training in a specific order. So the first thing that it requires is an Azure subscription. This layer, this outer box is your Azure subscription. So day one, we basically procured an Azure subscription, and then we started with virtual network. So we created a virtual network, and we created a virtual network in a resource group, right? So we created a resource group so that we can group all the resources into one folder, one directory, one place, so that we can manage them efficiently. So we created a resource group, and then we created a virtual network. And then we understood subnet concept. While we did virtual network, we understood NSG concept, right? That's what we did. And we also understood network interfaces, public and private IP concepts here, right? After that, we talked about storage. Now this data, this managed this is all storage that we did. This log storage account, all this is storage. And then finally, today we are talking about virtual machine. So we ensured that we cover services in the same order so that by the time we reach to virtual machine topic, you would understand that why did we cover the services like networking, storage to begin with, and where exactly do they have a role to play. So without a network, without a storage, you will not be able to build a virtual machine because it would need an IP address that comes from the subnet. Subnet is part of virtual network. Virtual network contains an address space from where the IP address is allocated to the virtual machine. An IP address is not residing on the virtual machine. Virtual machine, consider like a laptop. Your laptop has multiple hardware components. It has a network interface card. On that network interface card, the public and private IPs are allocated. So your virtual machine will have a network interface card, and on that network interface card, either a public IP will be allocated and private IP will come for sure, because private IP will come from the subnet range. So your virtual machine at any point in time will have a minimum of one IP, which is private IP, and may also contain a public IP address if by any chance you want to access that virtual machine from internet. So if you are sitting here somewhere, somewhere in the world, and via internet you want to access the virtual machine, you will access that virtual machine through its public IP, which is configured on virtual machine network interface, which is attached to the virtual machine. And virtual machine contains OS and applications. Now, this OS is not installed inside the virtual machine. This is installed on a disk, an OS disk. So OS is installed on a disk, and that disk is connected to the virtual machine. So you can see here with this virtual machine, we have an OS disk connected, and we have a couple of data disks connected to this virtual machine, right? And they are persistent connectivity, which means they are permanently connected to this virtual machine unless the virtual machine admin or Azure admin removes, detaches these disks or removes them or deletes them. Then you also see an additional disk with the name temp. What is the use of this disk? This temporary disk, you can see here, this is coming from outside of virtual machine, outside of your subscription. It says physical SSD on host. So the hypervisor, this is where virtualization comes into the picture. This virtual machine is hosted on a hardware. That hardware is controlled by a service with the name hypervisor, like VMware, Hyper-V, Citrix. So the temp drive comes from the hypervisor. So the hardware on which this virtual machine is hosted, that hardware also has some storage. A portion of that storage is assigned to your virtual machine in the form of temporary disk. The purpose of this temporary disk is to hold page file, which is virtual memory. It's a concept of operating system. any data written to this temp file, temp drive is volatile. Volatile, when I say it, basically means every time you reboot your virtual machine, whatever data is written here, whatever you store here in this temp disk will be erased. And there is no way to recover it. There is absolutely no way to do that. So we should not store anything on the temp drive. Now, there had been a lot of incidents in the past wherein customers knowingly or unknowingly ended up putting data into temp drive because they found it inside the OS. So they thought, okay, this is another drive that we have, and they stored data into it. And when that virtual machine rebooted, or that when that virtual machine automatically rebooted or shut down, or there was any issue because of which the reboot happened, they lost data. They approached Microsoft and said, we need our data back. Microsoft said that there was a clear cut warning inside the temp drive. There was a notepad file which clearly said that please do not store data here. This is for internal purpose. You didn't read, you didn't listen. Now we can't do anything. That data is gone forever. So this was the experience from some of the customers. And keeping that experience in mind, Microsoft evolved its virtual machine technology. And today we have a couple of virtual machines which does not have the stem drive added to them. They only have a root drive, which is C drive, and then the additional drives which customer provisions by themselves. So that's how it works. Now these OS disk, data disk, and the OS disk and both the data disk, they are nothing but managed disk. As I said, there was a time when Microsoft Azure would store virtual machine disk VHDs in a storage account, and storage account had certain limitations. So Microsoft was not able to uh, meet the expectation of large businesses which require higher performance, and that is where Microsoft uh, rehauled their virtual machine design. They introduced the concept of managed disk, which is stored on a separate hardware, and those managed disks are attached to the virtual machine now. These managed disks have their own advantages. I'll show you in the presentation. There is one slide which dedicates to managed disk also. So all the disks that you attach to your virtual machines, they are managed disk, and they are fully managed by Microsoft. And if your virtual machine shows you a temp disk, then please make sure that you don't store any data on it and understand that the disk is coming from the hypervisor on which that virtual machine is hosted. Other than this, you can store virtual machine logs with respect to who is logging in, what is being done, what kind of applications is being installed, what is being called, what process is running. All that if you want to log, then you can store them into a diagnostic logs. So you can configure diagnostic logs, and diagnostic logs are stored into a storage account. They can also be stored into a log analytics workspace, which is a log analysis service. So this is the architecture of your virtual machine, wherein you can see there are multiple components. This is a separate hardware component. This is a separate hardware. This is a storage service component. This is physical SSD on the host. This is where networking part comes into the picture. So all of these services, NSG, NIC, subnet, virtual network, they're part of NSG, including the public IP address, they're part of networking service category. And resource group is more of a container service. So there are multiple services that collectively that bind together, that bind with one another to form a virtual machine experience in Microsoft Azure. Hope that makes sense to everyone. Let me know if you have any questions so far. Any question, guys? Shall we proceed? Shall we move on to the next slide? Yes.
I had a question.
Yes, Reshma,
This
please go ahead.
sin- when you say manage disk, it means that Microsoft will take care of everything.
Uh, Manage disk basically means that data belongs to you. You will decide what performance you need on that disk, whether you need a standard disk or premium disk, whether you need a disk of, let's say, 10 GB, 20 GB, or let's say 1 terabyte. That's your decision. However, the availability of that disk, the management with respect to the hardware maintenance and whatnot in the backend is managed by Microsoft.
Okay.
When this used to be unmanaged, which basically means when you would provision a virtual machine and its disks are stored into a storage account, then you are whole and sole responsible for managing that storage account service and also the disk availability. But now it
Oh,
is managed disk, so Microsoft is managing it. You are just selecting them while provisioning a virtual machine, and you can add them, you can detach them, and you can pick and choose performance and size yourself. Rest leave it to Microsoft. That's what managed disk is, right?
oh,
So to understand more about managed disk, let's take a step back. This is the present. This is the benefits of managed disk. The first benefit you can see, it doesn't require any storage account anymore. Single VM image per region. Scalability, it doesn't do any throttling. Now, there used to be a limit so storage account has a limit, which is 20,000 IOPS. Storage account provides, I'm saying standard storage account, because premium did not exist. Premium was introduced later on. So a standard performance storage account offers 20,000 IOPS. 20,000 IOPS basically means 20,000 read and write requests per second it can accommodate. Okay. Now storage account contains both blobs. It contains both object data, the one that you dealt with yesterday, object data. It also contains file share data, right? And it also contains virtual machine disk. And there are users who are trying to access all of it. So there are users who are trying to access object data. There are users who are trying to access file share data. There are users who are also connecting to those virtual machines and doing some transaction. Collectively, the total limit of all of this is 20K, 20,000 read write requests. Now imagine there are 10 virtual machines in a storage account. I'm saying there are 10 virtual machines and they all use the same storage account. And each virtual machine has 4 disks. So in total, how many disks do we have? 40 disks, right? Across all VMs. Now, one disk, one virtual machine disk provides up to 500 IOPS. So how many IOPS these total disks will provide? 40 into 500 is equivalent to 20K. So your storage account limit is reached, which means you will not be able to put more than 40 disk into a storage account. And if you do that, what will happen to rest of the capabilities which are there? They also need some capability. They also need some processing. They also need read write, capability. So the performance bottleneck comes into the picture here. And this used to be a lot of this used to be pretty common back in 2012, 2013. And I remember working with customers assessing their storage accounts because when there were performance issues with virtual machines or Azure file shares or users complaining of not being able to access the blob data, the first thing that we would look into the number of services that you have provisioned in the storage account and then number of disk in the storage account. And then we would tell customer that, sir, create multiple storage account, but any point in time, please make sure that you do not go beyond 20 disk in a storage account so that you get optimal performance. There is no cost for creating additional storage accounts. You only pay for storing data. So create multiple storage accounts. Now, this was another misconfiguration. Uh, when you have more to support, definitely chances of misconfigurations or lapses are more. If I have one storage account, I can manage it end to end. If I have 1,000 storage account, imagine the administrative overhead. Definitely, I may miss something. I may overlook something. So there used to be a lot of challenges. And that's what I'm trying to say, that history is very important to appreciate a technology. When you know history, you appreciate your present. We knew that we were ruled by Britishers. We did not have our fundamental rights at one point in time. Our ancestors, our great grandfathers, they suffered a lot. So today we appreciate the freedom that we enjoy because we understand the history. If somebody who is not, you know, read history, that person would not understand the present, would not enjoy the present, or would not appreciate the present. So today I appreciate Microsoft Azure because I've seen Microsoft Azure growing, from what it used to be in 2010, when there used to be a lot of issues, and some customers would say that this new kid on the block would not survive in the long run. They can't compete Amazon Web Services. Microsoft is more good in making operating systems. Forget about building cloud technology. This used to be the feedback that I would hear from customers. And we sailed through those times. And today I see Microsoft Azure being most preferred cloud service provider for small and medium businesses because it provides services, more services. It is available in more region. Its services are comparatively low cost and it is very simple. The UI is simple. If you look at Amazon UI or Google UI, you will start to scratch your head because UI is not that great. And when you move from great to good, you don't like that. And imagine you're logged into Google AI, Google UI, which is nothing but a plain HTML page, all black and white. Even the newspaper that we read in the morning, they are now color. They have colors in it. And you are working with black and white screen. So that's how Microsoft Azure has evolved. And I personally appreciate Microsoft Azure because Microsoft technology has played a critical role in my career. And I have seen Microsoft cloud technology growing from what it used to be in 2010 and what it is today. So yes, this used to be the challenge. And because of this challenge, there was a lot of throttling. So when managed this service was introduced, that throttling challenge was addressed and storage account IOPS limits and all that was addressed. Faster, definitely, it works on RAID technology, allows faster upgrade to premium storage. It's highly available because Microsoft manages it, and it also supports access control. You can, similar to storage accounts and other services, you can navigate to a managed disk and you can define who will have access to that disk. So, for example, if I navigate to Azure portal and if I go to my virtual machine, I have one virtual machine. When I click on it, it shows me my virtual machine dashboard. I navigate to disk, and this is the disk that my virtual machine has. This is a managed disk. So when I click on this disk, it takes me to this disk blade. This is a managed disk, which Microsoft manages. And I can also directly go here by typing managed, by typing disk in the search bar. That will take me to the disk blade. Here I see all the disk. And when you click on any managed disk, you see this access control capability. This capability was not available in the past. Today, this capability is available. So that's the benefit of managed disk, that you can also configure the access, that who will have access to the disk, which was not available when it used to be unmanaged. So that's exactly what it says, that now you have Azure RBAC available and you will manage the exposure of it also. And support and features. Manage disk support backup. It supports snapshot. It supports recovery. And it also supports encryption. And managed disk also supports availability zone concept. And managed disk comes in premium category also. So these are the benefits of managed disk. I'm saying introduction of managed disk with Microsoft Azure was a game changer for Azure. Game changer. I still remember when this technology was introduced, I was in States. I was working, uh, I was basically doing a project for Manchester United, MU, which is one of the football club. And they, so the governing body had multiple football clubs, multiple football grounds or soccer grounds in United States and other countries. And when the soccer matches happens, they basically telecast it live, and they were gaining a lot of popularity at that point in time back in 2014, 2015. So they wanted to make sure that when they are telecasting the match live, there is no throttling, there is no streaming issues. Users are able to watch it flawlessly without any challenge, something that happens today. And you must have read on LinkedIn or in newspaper or heard from people that when World Cup final match were telecasted live on Hotstar, there were close to 6 crores plus concurrent users who were watching it on OTT. And there was absolutely no glitch, no performance issue. So something that they wanted to achieve a couple of years ago is, you know, is available today. And today they want to do something which will be available probably a couple of years from now. So it was a game changer. With the introduction of this service, we were able to satisfy or meet performance requirement of that project, because we were actually provisioning all the VMs with unmanaged disk. And then this announcement was made by Microsoft. We connected with Microsoft. Microsoft said that the service is in preview. However, the service was tested across multiple use cases. The performance regression testing all was complete. So Microsoft gave us a go ahead to use this service in Manchester product. And by the time the project was completed, the design went live, the managed disk service also came in GA. So client also had no issue in us using a service which was in preview when we started proposing that service. So this is a great service basically. Okay, any other questions? Now today, when it comes to managed disk, it comes in multiple varieties. I'm saying it all started with standard hard disk and then premium SSD. Later on, Microsoft thought that providing two varieties is not sufficient. There is a third type of customer who needs something in between, who needs a combination of it, who doesn't need magnetic storage, but at the same time, he or she doesn't want to pay for premium. So he needs something in between. And that's where Microsoft came up with another variety, which is this standard SSD, something in between. It is not completely standard and it is not completely premium. It's something in between. Then there was an elite class of customers who needed something far more better than premium. For those elite class of customers, Microsoft launched this ultra solid state drives, ultra SSDs. They have more performance than a premium SSD. So we have four types of managed disk today: standard HDD, standard SSD, premium SSD, ultra SSD. This is what happens today. And definitely, virtual machine disk has a direct dependency on virtual machine size. It cannot happen that you pick up a virtual machine size, which is like this. You pick up a general purpose virtual machine size, let's say B series, and you try to attach ultra disk here. No, it won't support. B series won't support ultra disk because ultra disk requires high configuration of virtual machine. A virtual machine that has good amount of CPU and RAM configuration, a virtual machine that runs on Intel hardware, a virtual machine that supports multi-threaded environment. So you will need to be aware of permutation and combination also. And that's what an architect or a consultant does when they propose a solution. They go through those permutations and combinations in detail before they arrive at a conclusion that, okay, there are 1,000 machines that we will build in Azure. We're not going with one series. It's not one size fits all. We will, based on the workload requirement and application requirement, performance requirement, we will pick and choose multiple virtual machines of different types in size. That's how it happens. So if you have access to uh, your customer environment, you can quickly validate that part. You can navigate to virtual machine blade like this here. On this blade, you can look for this column, which is size column. You will find in your customer environment multiple virtual machines, and you will also notice that the size will not be uniform across all virtual machines. It will change. You will find them with multiple sizes. Why this has been done? So that anything that is kept inside the virtual machine in the form of a workload or application, their performance requirement can be satisfied. That's the logic. I'll take a pause here and see if you have any other question with respect to virtual machine or disk. Any other questions, guys?
That's it from my side.
Okay, great. Let's move on, guys. So this is enough of theory with respect to virtual machines. Let's go ahead and get our hand dirty. Let's start to provision some virtual machines and see all the configurable options which are available on virtual machine dashboard. When you provision a virtual machine, we'll go through those options and we'll see. So let's navigate to your Azure subscription. Okay, Romil, are you still there? I think he has left. All right, no worries. I see him in this session. Yeah, so Romil, since you don't have access to your account and I want you to provision virtual machine, I will ask Farhan to add you in our account as a member user with appropriate access to virtual machine service so that you can practice provisioning virtual machines here. Okay?
Okay, okay.
Yeah. Farhan, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah, create an account for Romil in our directory.
Okay.
And grant him virtual machine contributor access so that he can provision virtual machines. Share his username and password, temporary password.
Okay.
Sure. Okay, great. So Romil, just wait for Farhan to create your member user in our directory, and he will share the credentials with you on the chat.
Yes, sure.
Okay, let's move on, guys. So when it comes to virtual machines provisioning, as I said, before you provision the virtual machine, you should have good understanding of networking. You should have good understanding of storage, and you should have good understanding of virtualization, because at the end of the day, it's a virtual machine, so that you are able to provision a virtual machine and be able to manage it also. See, provisioning a service is not difficult. You just need to follow the instructions on the portal and you will be able to provision it. What is difficult or what requires more knowledge and experience is management of that service. That is what you need to know. For example, understanding basics of Entra ID is very easy. But provisioning Entra ID is easy. You don't even provision it because it's a directory service. It falls under PaaS category, so it's already there. But you do some basic configuration. That part is easy. What is difficult is to manage Microsoft Entra ID on day-to-day basis. And that is why probably your customers who found it difficult, they found an expert in you, and they basically contracted TCS and said that you have experts, please let us use their services and we will pay you in return. And that's where this team was formed. This BU was formed with all like-minded professionals who comes from identity and access management experience, who have good knowledge of Microsoft Entra ID, and now you are managing the configuration for your customer, and they are paying you in return. That's how business goes. So you should have good understanding of configuration aspects of a service, not the provisioning. Provisioning anybody can do. So you will provision this service in next 15 minutes from now. You all would have a virtual machine of yours in your respective Azure account. But that is just 10% of it. The remaining 90% comes from experience. And nobody can teach you that 90% in next 90 minutes. Even I can't do that. Nobody can do that. That will come by experience. The more you work with the service, the more use cases you will come across, the more challenges and unpredictable situations you will be in. And that will teach you how to manage, how to address, and how to come out as a winner. That's how we basically deal with cloud services. Okay, give me a moment. All right. So let's move on. Let's start with the virtual machine provisioning. Is everyone logged into their subscription? Is everyone logged into the subscription?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. So let's start with virtual machine provisioning. We will hit create. Now see how many tabs are there. Probably more than what we had with Azure storage account yesterday, or much more than what we had with Azure Virtual Network Service day before yesterday when we were exploring that service, right? We have more tabs here. You need to fill in the information in all the tabs, one after another, till the time you reach to the last tab wherein you are ready to provision your virtual machine. So that's what you need to do. So let's get started. So the first tab is Basics tab. Now, when it comes to virtual machine in Azure, you have Linux and Windows. You can also provision Mac virtual machines. I'm saying iOS-based virtual machines in Azure, but there's a separate. Uh, I'm saying there is a separate method to do that. Here, you will directly get Windows and Linux. So let's say we will provision a Windows virtual machine. Since we are dealing with Microsoft, and Windows is an inherent or in-house technology of Microsoft. So we'll provision a Windows virtual machine. So we'll start with the Basics tab. On the Basics tab, this is common for all the service provisioning, subscription and resource group. Select your subscription and resource group. I'll select mine. Then comes virtual machine specific details. First, virtual machine name. Now, while you provision a service in Azure, always keep in mind service limits, nomenclature best practices. So when you name a virtual machine, you should not exceed the name of virtual machine beyond 15 characters. Why? Azure will not stop you. See, I can name this virtual machine like this. This is more than 15 characters and it has a green check also. Azure is accepting this name. The challenge will come if it's a Windows virtual machine and you join it to a domain. The domain has a concept of NetBIOS domain name. It won't accept more than 15 characters. So what will happen? Your virtual machine name in Azure portal will be this, and inside virtual machine OS will be something else. And that will create a confusion in the long run. So that is why when you create a virtual machine in Azure, if it is Windows virtual machine, make sure that you do not go beyond 15 characters. If it's Linux virtual machine, you can use up to 64 characters. Obviously, a virtual machine name cannot be this if you just use A. It also doesn't make sense. Azure will not stop you. Azure will say, okay, you need to manage it. It's an IaaS service. We don't bother about it. So make sure that you should use a minimum, uh, I would say a healthy number of characters, but the maximum should not go beyond 15 if it is Windows and 64 if it is Linux. That's one thing. In a production environment, uh, when we create a virtual machine, we typically use a name that clearly helps us recognize what that virtual machine is. What kind of application does it hold? What kind of environment does it belong to? That kind of information we get. For example, I can put a virtual machine name like this: US East PRD DYN app. One. What does it tell you? It says that this virtual machine is going to be hosted in US East region. It belongs to production environment. It probably contains the first three letters, shows the application name, Dynamics application, and it's an application server for Dynamics. Then I can create another virtual machine for database of Dynamics. I would say US East prod hyphen DYN SQL, DYN DB. So that way I can provision virtual machine, and the name itself tells me a lot of information. And I am also keeping in mind the limit, which is you can count it's 15 characters only. This is one example from one of my customers that I support. They basically use this nomenclature. Microsoft Azure also has a nomenclature document. You can go through it. Azure Resource Naming Convention. This gives you guidance that how should you name your Azure services, what should be there in the name so that it gives you most of the information. I'll put that into the chat window, and I'll also put that into the document. So you can see naming convention, right? It says PIP, resource type, SharePoint, workload and application, prod environment, West US, Azure region, 001 is the instance ID. So this is how it's just an example. And then you have the entire document which will help you to name resources. You can see recommendations for naming of subscription, resource group, virtual machines, networking, like virtual network naming, uh, recommendations that your virtual machine name should be like this so that you know that it's a shared network, it is in East US, it is number one, all that. So you will see nomenclature guidance for almost all the services of Azure. Let's move on. So we'll just create our first virtual machine. I will say Raghuveer VM 1. That this is my first VM. Then comes region. Choice of region is very important. If you select a region, you will pay the cost of that virtual machine based on that region, right? So cost of services in Azure differs from region to region. So make sure that you choose a region that satisfies your business requirement. And at the same time, that region also aligns with your budget. So we will choose here, since we are in India, we will choose South India, or wheresoever you have created your virtual network, because you will need that. And say after this, there will be a time when we will reach to networking tab, that is where we will need to provide virtual network and subnet information. So if you don't have a network in South India, obviously you will get stuck here on this page. And then Azure will probably create one for you that you may not like because it will use its own way of putting in place address space and subnets. So whichever region you have created your network, please choose that region for this virtual machine. I have one network in South India, so I'm choosing South India. Then availability options. There are
Raghu,
multiple availability options that we have. Yes.
Raghu,
Any
just
participant?
one, yeah,
Yes,
just
sure.
one question on that region. When you say the cost depends on the region, any specific reason for that? It's quite interesting.
Yeah, because see, we have, I would say each country has its own standard and cost of living. Uh,
Yeah,
so obviously, I'd say when you purchase something in US, it is a bit expensive as compared to India. Or when Microsoft opens a region in New Zealand, it will keep the prices low to attract more customers. And once they have, a good business coming from that region, then they will slowly and gradually increase the prices to meet their expenses or to be on a break-even point. That's how business works. So
yeah,
right
but
now
performance
they have,
wise, there'll not be
yeah,
any differences, right?
absolutely, there will not be any
Ah,
difference. I'm saying
okay,
you purchase an iPhone from India or from China, from US, performance-wise, they all are the same. The cost difference is there because each country has its way of taxing the citizens and business. So, for example, in India, you have GST. In Europe, you have some other type of taxes. In US, you have different types of taxes. That's how.
yeah,
That constitutes
makes
the price of a service, right?
yeah makes
So
sense.
the
Thanks,
reason
sir.
I'm taking South India because South India resources, as we speak, comes at a cheaper cost.
Makes sense.
Right?
Thanks, sir.
But don't feel, Shiva, that it's a significant difference in price. No, it's not significant. Sometimes it's partial, it's very substantial. But imagine a business who has 1,000 servers. See, $1 is 85 rupees for us. If there's a difference of $1, we'll say, oh, it's okay. I am good to go in US. It only charges 85 rupees extra. The moment I say that you will need to provision 1,000 VMs, then that $1 becomes $1,000. Now that becomes significant. Now you need to review your decision because that 8,500 rupees is now 85,000 rupees. So now you need to think about it. So when business chooses a region, they choose a region based on multiple factors. Factors like statutory compliances and regulations, factors like cost, factors like availability of service, factors like performance of that service in that region. A great example of this, let's say you are in India and there is a service which is very expensive in India, but the same service is available at cheaper cost in US. But your customers is in India. Now, what is the point of provisioning that service in US and then making your customers browse that service from India to US? Imagine the performance bottleneck. There will be latency, and that latency may probably spoil the experience of your customer. So, as a business, you are happy because you are paying low cost for these services, but your customers are not happy because they're facing a lot of performance issue. And probably tomorrow you will also not be happy when they leave you to your competition. Great. Let's move on. So there are multiple factors. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense, Raghu. Thank you.
Great. Let's move on. So when it comes to infrastructure redundancy, I'm saying there are two availability options in Microsoft Azure. I did not explain them in the beginning. I explained them today. Those availability options are this. Okay. So the first availability option is availability set. Now let's try and create a picture of Microsoft Azure data center in your mind, or let's just remember that Azure data center virtual tour that I took you on day one with a senior Microsoft executive. Okay. So you are inside the data center. It's a huge premises which comprises of multiple buildings. And some buildings have hardware, which is your data center floor or data center room. And it's a huge room. It contains thousands of hardware. And you are sitting right in the middle of that room, and you are surrounded by thousands of hardware. It's a huge room. I'm saying it's the size of an auditorium or a cricket ground, and you are surrounded by the hardware. And on those hardwares are arranged in a rack. So there are multiple racks, and on those racks, the hardwares are arranged in a very organized manner. So you don't have wires hanging here and there. It's very neatly cleaned infrastructure, but it's very huge, and you are standing right in the middle of it. Now you need to identify on which rack your virtual machine is hosted. So you're moving here and there, but you're just not getting any lead. You just don't, because all the hardware looks like the same. That has been procured from Dell. So it's the same Dell rack servers. You're looking for your virtual machines, you can't find it. You want to see how Microsoft is putting your virtual machine, where exactly your virtual machine is. You can't find it. You want to understand how Microsoft is ensuring high availability. So let's understand how Microsoft ensures high availability. Let's take the example of this slide. This slide basically shows you 3 racks. These are 3 different racks which contains hardware. Each rack is configured with an update domain and fault domain. So this rack has fault domain 0, fault domain 1, fault domain 2. And this rack has multiple hardware on it. This is the 4 hardware. These are 4 hardware which is there. This hardware is update domain 0. This hardware is update domain 1. This hardware is update domain 2. Let's understand what is update domain and fault domain. Update domain basically means that whenever Microsoft needs to do a maintenance such as upgrading the hardware. Upgrading the hardware means putting a firmware upgrades, right? Or put a security patches, or Microsoft needs to do some anything related to the hardware, any hardware related maintenance Microsoft needs to do, then Microsoft will not do that hardware maintenance on the entire rack at the same time. It will do that maintenance in an order. So all update domain 0, all the hardware which is tagged as UD0 will be maintained first, then it will go to UD1, UD2, right? Similarly, when Microsoft needs to do some power maintenance, because all of these racks have power supply coming to them. So when Microsoft needs to make some rack related maintenance, like separating hardware or making power related testing, Microsoft will not do it on all the 3 racks together. It will start with the first rack, FD01, FD0. It will complete it and then move on to the second rack, right? This is the order that Microsoft will do. Now, how it will give you high availability? What will I do as a customer? When I provision my virtual machine, I will provision them in an availability set. When I provision my virtual machine, the first virtual machine that I will provision them in fault domain 0, update domain 0. So my virtual machine comes here. When I provision my second virtual machine, I will provision that in fault domain 1 and update domain 1 or update domain 2, wheresoever. When I provision my third virtual machine, I will probably provision it here. Now, what will happen? At any point in time, it cannot happen that Microsoft is doing all the 3 rack maintenance at the same time. And it cannot happen that Microsoft is doing firmware upgrade on all the hardware at the same time, because it is doing that in an order. So let's say Microsoft is doing the firmware upgrade on update domain 0. This machine is down, but my 2 other machines are up and running. They will continue to cater to application, which is running on them. Let's say Microsoft is doing some power testing on rack number 2, which is fault domain 1. In that case, this machine will be down, but I still have 2 machines which are up and running, catering to my application. That's the high availability arrangement that Microsoft provides you. So Microsoft says that go ahead and provision your virtual machines across availability sets. This is the second option, availability sets in my data center, so that I can give you 99.95% of SLA. One of the virtual machine will continue to be available at any point in time, because I will not put my entire data center to maintenance at the same time. I will do that in a linear and logical manner in some sequence, and you align with that sequence. That's what availability set is. Is everyone with me on this concept? Yes, no, maybe?
Yes.
Great. Next is availability zone. So let's understand this concept. So once again, the same scenario. You're standing right in the middle of that room, which contains multiple racks, and you can visualize the cables, which are power supply cables. They are probably going into the rack, which is powering the rack. And you can see some tags, also some stickers that says UD1, UD2, FD1, FD2. And this gives you the confidence that great, Microsoft has really arranged this data center in a great manner. And I'm 100% confident that Microsoft will manage the high availability. And then all of a sudden, some short circuit happens and the data center catches fire. To save your life, you quickly run towards the exit and you come out. By the time you reach to the main entrance, there is a huge explosion that happens, and entire data center burns to ashes. Now you feel bad about it. You say, oh, what will happen to my data? It was inside the data center. I only had 3 copies of it because I chose LRS. Now all those 3 copies and my machine and my data is gone. I will go to Haridwar and become saint now, because there is no point going back to office. My management will kill me for bad design. That is where the other option comes into the picture. Guys, sometimes I take very strange examples, but my objective is to make sure that you are able to relate to those examples, so that you always remember the concept, not the example, concept. So the second example is availability zone. Imagine, instead of putting all the virtual machines in one data center, if you had put them across data centers, I'm saying, if you were using the concept of availability zone, wherein you absolutely had idea of how many data centers Microsoft had in this region. Let's say in Chennai, this happened in Chennai actually. So in Chennai, if you absolutely had idea of how many data center Microsoft had, then what would you have done? You would have put your one virtual machine in this data center. You would have put another virtual machine in this data center, and you would have put the third virtual machine in this data center. And these 3 data centers, or these 3 cluster of data centers, this is one cluster which comprises 2 data center. This is another cluster. This is another cluster. This is in the same region, which is South India. These 3 clusters, they are a minimum of 60 to 70 miles away from each other. An hour or 2 hours of drive. Now the same incident that happened cannot happen in all the data centers at the same time. It cannot happen that all these 3 data center clusters, which are 60, 70 miles away from each other, experience a short circuit and they catches fire and they are exploded. And you are once again planning to go back to Haridwar. Not possible. That's the concept of availability zone. If Microsoft has availability zone service available in a region, which unfortunately you don't have in South India, so you will probably go to Haridwar once again. But if it is there, for example, it is there in East US, North Virginia, big state, much bigger than Chennai. They have more than 50 data centers there. availability set and zone, both services are available. Make use of availability zone. Separate your virtual machines across data centers. There is no additional cost for it. It is just my design. This is how you need to design your solution, that I will use availability zone and I will separate my machines across data centers which are quite far from each other. And that way I will ensure that my machines are available at the same time. Okay, next example. Be where you were. You were outside of that data center which just exploded. And at the same time, you got a call from your associates that other two data centers where you had your other servers, because you were smart to plan availability zone, they also got exploded. I don't know why. I'm saying some coincident happened. All three data centers are exploded. So once again, you're going back to Haridwar, or if you have not designed the disaster recovery, if you were smart enough to anticipate that this would happen one fine day, life is uncertain, technology is uncertain, my application is mission critical, and if you had planned for disaster recovery, then this region is down, right? This region exploded, but you also have live replication of your application to a secondary region, which is Pune. And Chennai and Pune are quite far from each other. I mean, thousands of miles away. It cannot happen that both Chennai and Pune goes down at the same time. I mean, say the entire Chennai and Pune goes down. If that happens, then consider that probably China or Russia has dropped a nuclear bomb on India. Now, forget about Haridwar, forget about business, just save your life. That's more important. So these are the examples of availability options in Microsoft Azure. Based on what is criticality of your application, how much you can afford to pay, plan these options accordingly. If you feel that I don't even have money in my pocket, then go with the first option, which is single VM with premium disk. You will still get some availability, which is 99.9%. So it starts with 9990, then 9995, then 4 times 9. There is no, since this is disaster recovery, there is no SLA here. And when Microsoft is not able to meet, let's say you design it carefully, you design your services across a single VM availability set and availability zone. However, Microsoft has some issues in their data centers. For example, you designed it well in availability set. You basically put your servers across fault domain and update domain, but the entire data center exploded because of short circuit. So you are not at fault. Now it is Microsoft fault, and they will reimburse you for it. So they will calculate the percentage of your service, percentage availability of your service. When they see that, oh, your service was down for 24 hours or 48 hours, which violates my service level agreement, 99.95%, Microsoft will reimburse you for the entire service, which means that month you will not even pay a single penny for that service. Same here. If all the data centers go down at the same time and they remain down for a significant amount of time, which violates this SLA, Microsoft will reimburse you for the services. They will not charge you for that service. It basically means that in that month billing, you will get charged. However, in the subsequent billing month, they will reimburse the cost. I'm saying they will revert those charges. And you have the liberty to not pay those charges in that month also. They will not put any late payment or late charges on your payment method. That's how it happens in Microsoft World. Hope that makes sense, guys.
Yes, Raghav.
Great. All right. Forgive me for my example if any one of you felt offended with this, but I could not find a better way to explain it, because now you will remember it forever. You will never ever forget the availability set and availability zone concept. Okay, let's move on. So we are back once again on the portal. Now we know what we need to do. So we can select virtual machine, we can select availability set or availability zone. Right now, look carefully. The moment I'm selecting South India, I do not have this availability zone option. It is faded. Why? Because South India is not that big where Microsoft can build multiple data centers, or South India doesn't give that much of business to Microsoft that they are interested in expanding their business and investing more into South India. So right now they don't have availability zone in South India. But the moment I select any other region like East US2, availability zone is available. So by default, even if there is one data center of Microsoft in any region, availability set will be available. So I still remember back in 2014, 2013, when availability zone was not available, we would always make sure to convince our customer to go with a minimum of 2 VMs for each service, and we would configure those VMs inside an availability set so that we are 100% confident of the fact that any data center level maintenance or downtime will not affect my service. Microsoft will do it in a planned manner based on their update and fault domain tagging. So we will continue with South India once again because my network is in South India. Okay, South India, and then availability options. Now you have understood the concept. Let's not use them. I'm saying you can use them. If I say availability set, it will just create one availability set for me. So the point is that you should understand the configuration or the meaning of that option. Whether you are building that in the lab environment is secondary. So we'll just go with no infrastructure redundancy required. Then security type. Next thing, there are two options, standard and trusted launch virtual machine. Understand the difference. Standard means standard. Trusted launch means protect against persistent and advanced attacks on generation 2 virtual machines with configurable features like secure boot and virtual trusted platform module. Nowadays, so Gen 2 virtual machines are Intel, Intel based. They support secure boot and TPM, trusted platform module technology. These two technologies are to protect hardware from security incidents. Hacker went a long way. They are also people like us. I'm saying I may become a hacker tomorrow when I'm not happy with this world, when I want to take revenge with somebody. So when these hackers are people like us, it's just that they have destructive thoughts. They are against construction. They want to destroy things, or they have some malified intentions. So what has happened in the past? Nowadays, it is not your operating system which is corrupted. It is not your application which is corrupted. It is not an entire malware solution that can support you. Ransomware became so advanced that it started to corrupt hardware. It basically affected the boot sector of a server, because of which server is not booting at all. So forget about your entire malware solution. It can't do anything. Server has to come up first. Then only you can troubleshoot it. You can fix the issue. You can remove the virus. You can remove the ransomware. It has corrupted the boot sector. And when you turn it on, you just get one warning. Hey, hello, please pay me this money. Otherwise, you will not be able to run this machine. What will you do now? That is known as hardware level security threats. So to tackle those hardware level security threats, technology, constructive people like us, we also worked hard. We came up with the concepts of secure boot and trusted platform module, which basically monitors the boot level sector for any configuration modifications. It would not allow boot level changes, boot level configuration changes on a hardware which is secure boot and TPM. So your laptop, I'm saying if your laptop contains Intel hardware, you can just click on start button and you can type secure boot and you will see it there. I'll show you. So this is the feature. This is the feature that I'm talking about. You can see here TPM specification subversion 1.3.8. This is the TPM. So my laptop is from Dell. It's a high-end laptop that I use for my trainings. This laptop has both security processor and TPM. It supports secure boot and TPM. So there is no way for a hacker to actually corrupt my laptop, to hack into my laptop, because I have these services enabled. And I'm quite confident on Dell, for Dell and Intel, for these capabilities that they have provided, for which I have paid additional penny. These are the technologies which protect your hardware. So that's exactly what Microsoft is asking. Microsoft is saying, hey, would you be willing to pay some additional penny to us so that we can give you some secure hardware to host your virtual machine, wherein your application will be uh, secure, more than secure? If you say yes, go with trusted. But the moment you select trusted, then you will need to choose a virtual machine that supports this kind of technology, because at the backend virtual machine types that we did, they are based on Intel hardware, they are based on AMD hardware, some of them are based on Gigabyte. So there are multiple hardware, motherboard hardware technologies. So the moment you select a higher configuration, then rest of the option also needs to be selected accordingly. I'm saying you cannot purchase a Maybach and put it in a rented flat. You probably need a big bungalow, sea facing bungalow. Then it makes sense to purchase a Maybach. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. So we will go with standard security type. But now that you understand the trusted part also. Next, image. Image basically means the operating system that I need on my virtual machine. Now, Azure provides you multiple operating system. You have Red Hat, you have almost all Linux distributions, and you have all versions of Windows. Windows any which ways will be there because it's from Microsoft. So we'll just go with Windows 2019 x64 Gen 2. You can go with 2022 or 2016 also, guys, or you can go with Windows 10 and 11 also. The reason I'm going with Windows 2019, because I foresee using this virtual machine for our next lab also. When we do the lab for Entra, we need virtual machines. So we'll probably reuse these virtual machines there. So that's the reason we are going with the Windows server, so that we can promote it to a domain controller, put Active Directory domain services, and take care of the next lab also. Great. Is everyone with me so far?
Yes, Raghu.
Great. Let's move on. Then comes VM architecture. Since you have selected Windows 2019, it doesn't support x32. I'm saying x64 and 32-bit is gone. They are past now. It's all x64 hardware. Run with Azure Spot Discount. Great, great thing. So Microsoft has opened a data center, opened a region in New Zealand. This was done yesterday only, just imagine. And Microsoft has no takers right now. The entire data center is running vacant. However, Microsoft is still paying for hardware. Microsoft is still paying for electricity. Microsoft is still paying for manpower, CCTV cameras, and whatnot. So Microsoft is incurring a lot of losses right now. This is known as investment, basically. So to get some ROI on that investment, what Microsoft does, when Microsoft has some vacant capacity available in its data centers, Microsoft offers offers the capability at a cheaper rate, which is known as spot discounts. So Microsoft says that, okay, I've just opened this region in New Zealand, and I'm sure for next 6 months I will not have 100% capacity exhausted. So let's just offer these instances at some additional discounts to my existing customers, who will be willing to do some POCs, some testing, uh, so that they can also get some they can also get some reduced cost, and I can also recover some of my investments. That's what spot discount is all about. So you can you can check this box. If that spot discount is available in South India, you will get it. But take my words, you don't have it right now. South India is not that big data center, and Microsoft doesn't have a spot capacity available there. Okay. So it clearly says that my subscription also doesn't support virtual machine creation in South India. Choose a different location. So why it doesn't support in South India? As I said, South India is a small data center of Microsoft. They don't have capacity for people like me who are paying, who have paid, let's say 10 rupees and who have got a service worth 1,000 rupees. Unless and until I upgrade to pay as you go, I become an actual customer of Microsoft, then till the time they would not allow me to use their regions which are premium or which have, which are running short of capacity. So what I will probably do, I will change my region from South India to East US. East US is the largest region of Azure, and I will get capacity there. So in East US, I will go with no infrastructure redundancy, security type standard, operating system same. And here you can see the size is currently unavailable. It says this size that I'm choosing is not available in East US, but that's okay. I can choose any other size. So I can click on see all sizes here, and I will see a couple of sizes in East US that I can pick and choose. These are all the sizes which are available, right? So other sizes which are, so these are the sizes which are available. To keep the cost low, I will probably choose a size. And this is, don't think that this will happen all the time. It's all dynamic. Probably today we don't have sizes available. Tomorrow we will get the sizes. Maybe some customers this morning have acquired the hardware. Tomorrow they will delete machines and sizes will be available. It's all random allocation that happens in Azure. So I'll go with this size. No, this size actually has 8 GB RAM. I don't need 8 GB RAM. So I'll go back and I'll see if I can choose any other size in East US. No, this is 16 GB RAM. I don't need this. This is 28 GB RAM. I don't need this. 8 GB. I don't need this. These are unsupported. These sizes are not available. So what I will do, once again, I'll change my reason, guys. So instead of taking East US, I will probably take Canada Central. In Canada Central, I should not face any issue. This is exactly what you need to do, guys. So now I'll take Canada Central because I have a network there. And in Canada Central, I can easily get sizes. So standard, I'll select Windows 2019. And you can see there is no challenge, no error here. This size is available, but I don't need 8 CPU cores. I will probably go with this, this size, B2MS, which is not this one, this one, B2S. This is a low cost virtual machine. Look at the cost, only 3,000 rupees per month, 3,300 rupees per month. And this gives me 2 CPU core, 4 GB RAM, more than sufficient to run my virtual machine. So I'll go with this size. If you don't get B series in your region, you can settle with D series also. D series also gives you similar sizes. I'm saying you can go with a DS1V2, which gives you 1 CPU core and 3.5 GB of RAM. The reason I'm going with a lower size so that I can save cost here, because at the end of the day, I have $100. So I want to, I want to be a bit kind of cautious from day one while I provision these services so that I don't lose my money. So I'm going with this size. Whatever lower size you have available in your region, please go ahead with that size. Is everyone with me on this?
Raghu, can you please repeat once again?
Size option?
Yeah, size option.
You can pick and choose the size which is lower in configuration, because for each size you see the cost here, right? So choose a size, whatever is available, whatever is available at a lower cost. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, in future, if we want to increase the size, we can change the size option, right?
Absolutely. Azure
Okay.
is scalable. You can increase the virtual machine size.
Okay.
You can, in fact, move from one series to another. Let's say I'm going with, right now I'm going with this series, right? B series. If I want to switch to D series, F series, I can also do that. If within the B series I want a higher size, I can also do that. Azure doesn't stop me from that.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Next. So hibernation is not available Forget about it. You already know what hibernation is. Username. Type the username. So I typically go with this username, which is Azure user, and password is admin at 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. That's what I go with so that I don't forget it. You can put a username and password of your choice, but please make sure that you remember it. Done? Next, inbound port rules. Now you are provisioning a virtual machine. Definitely you would want to connect, you would want to RDP or SSH into it so that you can deploy your application, you can configure it. So from that perspective, what Azure is doing, Azure is smart. Azure noticed that we picked up a Windows virtual machine. Azure is now enabling in enabling access on port 3389, which is RDP, which is meant for virtual machines. Windows, which is meant for Windows operating system. So what Azure will do, Azure will create a network security group, NSG, and in that NSG, it will create an inbound rule to allow traffic from internet on port 3389. That's exactly what Azure will be doing. Then comes licensing. We need to be a bit dishonest with Microsoft here. Microsoft says that, do you have a license? If you want to be honest, don't check this box and pay for license also. I would like to be a bit dishonest for a while, and I would say, yes, I have a license, and that way I will save the license cost here. So the moment you check this box, you're telling Microsoft that, Microsoft, you know what, I have license for Windows Server. Don't bill me extra for license. Next is disk. We are done with the basic step. This is all that we have on basic step. Next is disk. This is where you need to make a selection, how many disks you need and what performance you need on those disks and what size you need for each disk. So directly come to OS disk. It says OS disk size. By default, Azure will create one OS disk with each VM, because without a disk, it would not be able to store operating system. Without an operating system, VM will not work. So it will create one disk of 127 GB. And since Microsoft wants to make money at the end of the day, they would start with the most costly options. So by default, premium SSD will be selected. And that is where you need to play smart. You will need to select standard SSD or standard HDD. I would suggest all of you select standard HDD, because we will only use these virtual machines for lab environment. So there is no point of paying extra cost in the form of SSD or premium SSD. And make sure that you are not even selecting premium SSD by mistake. Otherwise, your $100 will be spent quickly. So use standard SSD. Is everyone with me on this?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Let's move on. Now this box, delete with VM. This is very important. Keep it checked. So what it will do when you delete the VM, this disk will also get deleted. That way, it will not unnecessarily incur cost on you. Then if you want to add extra disk, I'm saying you need some additional disk to keep some additional data on your VM, you can attach them from here. If you have an existing disk, you can attach an existing disk. If you don't have a disk, you can create a new disk and attach a new disk. Create and attach a new disk. So we'll just skip this step. We are good with one OS disk only. Next, networking. On the networking tag, you will need to select your network in which you want this virtual machine to reside. Since I have selected Canada Central, let me see if I have a network there. Yep, I have a network in Canada Central, which is VNet1 Entra ID. I will choose my network. If you don't have a network in a region that you have selected on Basics tab, Azure will create a network on your behalf. And how do you know that Azure is creating a network? It will have new in bracket, new as a prefix before the name. So that tells you that Azure is creating something new for you. And if it doesn't have it, then it means that it already exists. So I'm selecting my own network and my own subnet. So I'm putting this VM into web subnet. There are two subnets. I can put them in any of the subnet. Now I will need to connect to this VM. And since I don't have a VPN tunnel from my laptop to this network in Azure Canada Central, I will need a public IP on the VM so that I can directly RDP into this VM using the public IP. And that's why Microsoft is creating a new public IP for me. If I don't want a public IP, I can click on the drop down and select none. Don't select none, guys, because you also don't have a VPN tunnel from your laptop to that region in Azure where you are creating this VM. So make sure to let Microsoft create a public IP. Rest of the information remains the same, which is Microsoft is creating a basic network security group. In that network security group, Microsoft will whitelist port 3389 there. So that's what Microsoft is going to do. So we are going with the default option. And once again, we will check this box that says delete public IP and NIC when VM is deleted. So that when I delete my VM, the disk of the VM, the public IP of the VM, and the network interface on the VM all gets deleted, and I am saved from any charges that Microsoft will incur. So that's why I will check this box. Next option, load balancing. If you have plans to uh, deploy a highly available application on this VM, multiple instances of the same role like web app DB, and if you already have a load balancer created before coming to this stage and creating the VM, you can choose that load balancer from here. Load balancer or application gateway from here. Since we have no intentions to go to that depth, so we'll just keep it as it is none. So this is what you select on the networking tab. Any question on this tab, guys? Is everyone with me on this?
Yes, sir.
Great, let's move on. Management tab. Next is management tab. Now this is where Microsoft will try to take some money from you because you've been so cautious so far. You have not selected any higher configuration. You're just sticking to what your pocket allows. This is where Microsoft will offer you some additional services, some value added services that will have commercial implications. So for example, Microsoft says that how do you want to authenticate to this VM? There are two options. You can use Microsoft Entra ID authentication also. We will talk about this feature probably next week when we do Microsoft Entra ID. It doesn't mean next week you will not provision VM. You will provision all of the services that you have provisioned this week multiple times next week while doing Entra ID. So that's the reason we are spending the week on building the basics, making a strong foundation of core services. So we will look into this next week. Let's talk about auto shutdown. Microsoft said that you can enable auto shutdown, which means this VM will automatically shut down at this time. So please enable this feature so that if you forget to shut down the VM, at least Microsoft will shut it down for you. So I would say that, so right now it says 7 p.m. UTC. You can select your time zone. I would say that go ahead and shut down this VM at 7 p.m. according to India time zone. UTC 5:30, Chennai, Kolkata, Mumbai. So it will shut down my VM at 7 p.m. every day. It will not turn it back on. It will only shut down. If you want full automation, that shut it down in the evening, bring it back in the morning. For that, you need to write a logic app or you need to write a PowerShell script, embed it into an automation account and attach automation account with this VM. So it can also send you a notification before shutting down the VM. I'll just uncheck it. I don't want to be bombarded with one email every day in the evening, which will come from Microsoft stating me that the VM is shutting down. Backup. Yes. Yes, Naeem.
Raghuveer, where can we attach this automation account logic here?
Automation account and logic app, they are two different things. I'm saying that
Yeah, this was
auto shutdown and auto start is possible using both logic app as well as automation account. That's what I'm trying to say. You can achieve this
I mean,
from any of those methods.
that's okay. I mean, how can I integrate that automation account here? Is here. Uh, yeah.
Okay, we can discuss it offline. Naeem, probably after this session is over at 1 o'clock, I can show you. I'm saying that there's a
Yeah,
different view
yeah.
for it, not here.
Okay. I'm
Okay,
having some more doubts. We will have a call after on Saturday. I expect. Okay.
sure. Okay, no worries. Let's move on. So, guys, next option is backup. Do you want a backup of the virtual machine? You can check this box and then it will give you some additional options. Let's not check it because we are not focusing on infrastructure related issues. Site recovery, if you want disaster recovery, you can configure it from here. So each option that you are selecting, except this auto shutdown doesn't have a cost, but this backup and site recovery has a cost. Then comes OS updates. Now, in a production environment, you would not want Microsoft to update your virtual machine. You would you would have a team like SCCM or patching team. They typically have a schedule. They have an order in which they perform patching, starting with non-production environment to production. So we will just say, no, you don't do it. I will take care of it. I will update my virtual machine operating system when I need to. Or if you want Microsoft to do it, just let it by automatic by OS, wherein Microsoft will do it. So I will go with manual update. I will do it. I don't want Microsoft to reboot my VM. That's it. That's on the management tab. We are good with management tab. Let's move on to the next, which is monitoring. Now, definitely you want your virtual machine to be monitored for availability and performance. So for that, you can configure it here. We will talk about monitoring tomorrow when we do monitoring topic. We have a separate topic for monitoring. So we'll come back to monitoring from monitoring service, not from here. Any configuration that you select here will basically get configured in monitoring service. So just leave this field as it is. Let's move on to the next tab, which is advanced. Now, this is another tab. This is where if you want some applications pre-installed on your virtual machine, let's say I want some antivirus on this virtual machine. I want some PDF solution. I want some MS Office on this virtual machine and whatnot. If you want some additional application to be installed on this virtual machine, you can install them through extensions. So there's an option that says select an extension to install. And here you will see a lot of extensions. For example, I can select Symantec antivirus. I can select all of these extensions which are here in this list. So I can select monitoring agent, Dynatrace. I can select Kaspersky, Key Vault, and whatnot. These are the extensions which are available. So I will close it. I don't want to select any extension. If you want to select a VM application to install, you can select an application also. Leave that part. If you want to put anything on the VM, let's say this is where automation comes into the picture. Let's say I want web services to be enabled on this VM with a default IIS page, and I have a script for it. I can put that script here. As soon as the VM is provisioned, the script will trigger and it will perform the job. That's what custom data is. So these are all the options. The important option that you need to understand here is host. No, not this one. This one, proximity placement group. Understand what is this option. And to understand this option, you will need to go back to the same data center where you were standing in the middle of it, which is equivalent to the size of a soccer field. And you were on the data center floor, right in the middle of it. And you were trying to find your virtual machines. And luckily, you were able to find your virtual machines. However, you really felt bad when you come to know that one virtual machine at one end or one corner of the data center and the other virtual machine is at the other corner of the data center. And there is almost a 200 meters distance between those two virtual machines. You really felt bad. You thought, what if I have my virtual machines sitting right next to each other? Probably not in the same rack. Otherwise, there will be an availability issue, but probably in two different racks which are as closer as possible to each other with separate update and fault domain. If this is the thought that comes to your mind while you are standing there, this is the service that you need to configure. Proximity placement group. This service will allow you to group Azure resources physically closer together in the same region. So Azure will try to put them as closer as possible, keeping in mind availability options like an availability set and availability zone. Every thought that comes to your mind has a trigger. The trigger is that you are using SAP application, SAP ERP module. SAP is a latency sensitive application. SAP has multiple tiers: web dispatcher, application tier, central instance, databases, SAP router, SAP HANA, SAP Solman. There are multiple tiers in SAP, and it's a latency sensitive application. It requires a minimum latency of less than 5 milliseconds between all the tiers. So if those instances are closer to one another, the latency will be low because they are closer. So the traffic will be quicker between the instances. But if they are farther from each other, the more they are away from each other, the more time it will take the traffic to reach and come back, right? The latency is the direct measure of the traffic, source and destination traffic. So in case of SAP applications or in case of any application which requires a minimum of latency, minimum possible latency between inter tiers, app, web, and DB. For those applications, we provision proximity placement group service, and we choose and we place our VMs into proximity placement group, so that when Microsoft receives this configuration, Microsoft knows that, okay, this VM needs to be placed near to other VMs which are already part of this group. So then Microsoft will try to place them together as closer as possible. That's what proximity placement group is all about. This was the last option on the advanced tab. Any question on this, guys? I will not put you back into that data center anymore because we are almost done with that virtual machine. Any questions so far? Yes, no, maybe? Is everyone done?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we are done with all the options, guys. Next is tag. You already know the significance of tags. If you wish, you can put certain tags. Otherwise, just leave it as it is. It's optional. And now see all resources. If you click here, Azure is going to tag all the dependent resources which are going to be built along with this virtual machine. That's what Azure is going to do. Next, in the end, you will hit review plus create. And if you have provided all the information correct, then it will quickly validate and it will enable the create button. That will be a go ahead for you to provision this VM. So we'll wait for final validation to complete. And then you will also see the actual price that you will pay for this VM. Okay. So the validation passed. The actual price that I will pay for this VM is 3,000. Sorry, this is the actual price that I pay for this VM is almost 4 rupees per hour. 3.8602 INR per hour. It shows per hour cost. So 4 rupees per hour, approximately 96 rupees per day, and 3,000 rupees per month. So that's the cost of my VM, which includes the cost of disk, which includes all the cost. Okay, let me take my statement back. This includes the cost of the VM, not the cost of the disk and public IP. The storage and networking cost will be billed separately. This is only the virtual machine cost, which is the operating system on the virtual machine. The operating system cost and the hardware cost, which is CPU and memory that you have selected. That's what this cost is all about.
Raghuveer, once we open this VM, right? So for suppose we haven't stored any data in the manager disk or any of the storage area. So does it cost anything?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. The storage and networking cost will be separate. You have just attached 127 GB of disk on the VM, right? With which will keep the OS data. So Azure will charge you for 127 GB also. You have a public IP attached on the VM because you've selected it during configuration. So Azure will
Yeah.
charge you for that public IP also.
So along with this, that will also get charged if we use or if you are not going to use, right?
Storage is charged based on allocation, not on consumption, which means even you don't use this VM, you will get charged for this VM plus that disk. Public IP is the same cost. Public IP will also get charged even if the VM is turned off. So there are three charges that will incur: VM cost, storage cost, and public IP cost. Since you have not
In this four
selected backup and disaster recovery, no cost. You have not selected load balancer, no cost. You have not selected monitoring, no cost.
Okay.
Right? So that's how the cost is. Now just hit create and you are ready to provision the very first VM in your respective Azure subscription. So guys, this is all about VM provisioning. I'm saying, trust me, even today, there are people who work with Azure day in, day out. They don't even know all the configurable options. They don't have clarity on all the options because they don't choose it. They don't go with those options in their production environment. But my purpose is to talk about two services, but talk in depth so that when you go back to the floor and say that you've learned about virtual machine, you're ready to answer every question that comes to you from your management or from your peers. When they ask you, okay, you know about virtual machine, let me ask you a question. And they all of a sudden search it on Google and say, what is proximity placement group? You should have answer to that question. Otherwise, it will be a disrespect of me, of my time, of my commitment. So this is how I prepare you. Great. So this virtual machine is getting deployed now. It will take 2 to 3 minutes for a virtual machine to get deployed. It also depends on what kind of hardware you have chosen, how many components are getting deployed along with this virtual machine. Since we kept it low, we did not choose additional options which costed us money. So it will probably take a minute or maybe 2 minutes. Now, on the automation part, if you want to configure virtual machines with similar settings, because you almost took 35 minutes to complete this exercise. Now you don't want to spend 35 minutes every day. Then you can also download the template. Once this virtual machine is created successfully, then I can download this template, uh, which contains the code for virtual machine. The ARM template, the automation template, I can download here on my system. And next time when I want to provision the same virtual machine, with some configuration changes, like I want to change the name or I want to change the network, I will use the downloaded template. I will upload that into the automation account and I can hit provision and it will provision the virtual machine. So my virtual machine is completed. Its deployment is complete. The reason I did not download the template before, because what if the virtual machine fails? What if there is an issue? Then the template would have that issue. But now I'm 100% confident that my template is correct. So I can download this template like this. Template is downloaded. And in future, if I want to provision virtual machine, I will type deploy a custom template. And from here, it says build your own template in the editor, or I can say quick start template. These are the options basically. So here I can go ahead and use these are common templates. I can use my own template and I can load file. So the file that I downloaded here, that's the automation part. I'm just covering it at a very high level because our objective is not to learn automation in this training, but this is how we do automation basically. So this was the template. I can open the template. It has uploaded the template. Basically, the template file was downloaded into the zip file. So what I will do, I will first unzip the file and then load it here. So when I load the file, it will pick up all the same information like variables, resources, parameters. Then I can go to any of this field variable and I can change the name, I can change the IP, whatever I want to change. And once I'm done, I will save the template like this. I cannot save it right now because it's a zip. The template was downloaded in a zip file. Once I save the template, then I can just go ahead and submit the template and it will provision another virtual machine. So that way I can use automation from the Azure Resource Manager template perspective to rebuild a similar resources that I need to as part of my operations. So that's the another thing that you need to know with respect to provisioning multiple virtual machines at the same time. Okay. So my virtual machine is built now. I can see my virtual machine is up and running. It says Raghuveer 1. The region is Canada Central, and virtual machine status is running. It's Windows virtual machine. It's using standard B2S. And here's the public IP of my virtual machine. So after the virtual machine is built, I will click on virtual machine name. That will take me to my virtual machine blade. And here I will see all the options related to the configuration of my virtual machine, related to troubleshooting, monitoring, backup, disaster recovery, or whatnot. Now, people who work in Azure operations, your infrastructure team, they have to be well versed with compute services because that's what they deal with day in, day out. So you either have your applications installed in virtual machines or in Kubernetes. Some organizations use Kubernetes clusters to deploy applications. So either they are well versed with Azure Kubernetes service or Azure Virtual Machine service. That's what their core skills are. So if you ever plan to move into infrastructure side of the world, these are the services that you need to have good expertise with. So this is my virtual machine. Now, how do I connect to my virtual machine, which is the last step of this, of this topic. So if you want to connect to your virtual machine, there are three options actually. The first option is you can connect via Bastion. Bastion is a service that we uh, discussed in virtual network when we were doing virtual network. And if you want to learn in depth about Bastion, I have a video on Bastion, I believe. Let me share the URL of that video. Yep, Bastion. So this is the video. If you want to learn in depth, what is Bastion service? Why do we use it? What are use cases? How do we provision Bastion service? Uh, you know, and then how do we make use of all that is explained in that 46 minutes of video with respect to Bastion that I'll share with you. So I put that into the chat window. Go ahead and watch that video, and along with that video, you can build Bastion service, test it, and after you are done, go ahead and delete the service also, because this service will cost you approximately anywhere from $1 to $3 per day, based on the region where you are provisioning it. So that's about Bastion service, which you have. Now, so we will not use Bastion service here. We will use the other option, which is connect. Now, when you hit connect, you can download the RDP file of this VM, and then you can double click on the file. It will ask you for username and password, type it, and you are connected to the VM. So I can download the RDP file on my system like this. And once that file is downloaded, I can navigate to the file, double click on the file, and it will give me connect options like this. So I'm getting the connection prompt wherein it will ask me for the password. Since it's a RDP file, it already contains VM information with respect to public IP, with respect to authentication protocol, with respect to username of the VM. Hence, the username is also showing. All I need is password. If I'm going with this method, RDP method, there is another method which is typically used by people who are probably into this domain for a long time. They don't use RDP files. What they do, they directly capture the public IP of the VM like this, and then on their system, they open this run box. They type mstsc, which opens remote desktop connection prompt, and they copy the public IP here and hit connect. So that way also you will get the connection prompt. However, over here, you will need to type the username also because you have just typed the IP address. So it doesn't have that VM information. So you will click on more choices, use a different account, and here you will type username of your VM and password, the one that you used while provisioning the VM. Then hit OK, it will connect. You will get certificate error because the certificate on your system as well as on Microsoft Azure is different. So you can just check this box. Don't ask me again for this certificate. Click yes, and you will get remote of your VM. So it's configuring remote session, and there we go. We are now connected to our virtual machine, which happens to be a Windows 2019 server operating system. In my case, since you are logging in for the first time, it has to create your user profile, it has to load a couple of settings, but any subsequent login that you will do, that will be quicker because it would have that information already configured. How quickly this VM will run, how fast this VM will run also depends on the storage performance, in our case, which is magnetic. So we can afford to have some delay, and also the virtual machine size. In my case, it is 2 CPU core, 4 GB RAM. So even if this virtual machine runs a little bit slower, because it's a server operating system, typically server needs additional capability. I will be quite okay. I don't mind, even if it runs slower.
Raghu, hello.
Yes.
I have a question like, see, for example, in our team, we are having eight people, right? So for each and every people, we need to create a single, separate VMs in Azure.
In your team, you have 8 people.
For example, for suppose in our team, we are having 8 people. Okay. So for each, so as to give access to each one of them. Should I mean, do I need to prepare each and every 8 VMs in the Azure?
No, I'm saying, see, it depends. I'm saying if you are 8 different learners, 8 different people who are trying to learn Azure, definitely they will need to build their own virtual machines and explore it. But if it's a production environment, then you only need to provision 8 VMs if you need 8 VMs, if you need to install applications on them. If there are 8 people in the team, 1 VM is sufficient because at the end of the day, you all are providing the support to the same customer. So you don't need 8 VMs.
So with the same VM, 8 members can log in, right? You are saying?
No. That's a different concept. At the max, you will be at the max, any server and client operating system supports a maximum of 2 concurrent sessions. 2 users can log into a VM. If you want more users to log in, then there are 2 options. You need to purchase remote desktop licenses, client RDS CAL license. If you want more people to log in, right, on a VM, which is known as RDS CAL license, remote desktop service client access license. And with that, you can have multiple concurrent user sessions on a VM or a server. I'm saying on a VM which has client or server OS. This is one option. The second option is multi-session VM. Azure also provides you multi-session VM, and on that, multiple concurrent sessions can happen. But this multi-session VM only supports client OS, which is Windows 10 and 11. There is no server operating system that supports multi-session. For servers, we always go with RDS CAL. Make
So,
sense?
yeah, actually I'm using VDI, right? So, which is the case I'm using here?
So VDI is a different concept. See, in case of VDI, depends on which VDI you're using. Do you know whether it is VMware, Citrix, Azure, AWS? Which VDI is that?
I'm using Citrix.
Okay, you're using Citrix VDI. So on Citrix VDI, the VDI admin will configure the number of concurrent sessions. VDIs are of two types. You have shared desktop and you have dedicated desktop, right? I don't know whether you have a shared desktop or dedicated desktop. If it's shared desktop, then multiple users can log in to the same machine at the same time. And if it's dedicated desktop, then only the person who has been dedicated or who it has been dedicated to can log into the machine. And in all the VDI solutions, whether it is Microsoft VDI, whether it is you know Citrix VDI, whether it is Amazon VDI, they have the same option. So I actually delivered Amazon Workspaces, which is Microsoft, which is AWS VDI, and Azure Virtual Desktop, which is Microsoft Azure VDI, training this year. So I still have those session recordings. I'm just running short of somebody who can, kind of edit them, remove all the pauses and personal references and upload it to my channel. So whenever I get somebody, I will have them uploaded to my channel so that if you have interest, you can also learn how we work with VDI technologies, how we design and architect VDI solutions. Hope that answers your question with respect to whether 8 people can log in or not.
Yeah, I got your answer. So, is
Yeah.
it possible with, I mean, you are saying it is possible with the Azure also providing the same shared desktop and
Yeah, that's the
dedicated.
service. Azure Virtual Desktop. This is the service. I will say, if you want to explore that service, you just type Azure Virtual Desktop. This is the service. So with this service, you can basically create both. You can basically do both desktop and application virtualization. You can virtualize your desktops, which is VDI, and you can also virtualize applications directly. Like you want your employees to use a browser that is monitored by your employer. So you can virtualize Internet Explorer, Google Chrome, whatever, and you can publish it to your employees. So your employees, when they open browser on their local system, on their corporate laptop, that browser will be managed by this service. That's the service that we use in Microsoft World, and the on-premises version of this service is known as RDS, Remote Desktop Services.
Okay. Actually, I was interested to, I mean, because we are using VDIs on the remote desktop. So I was just curious to know whether this is the thing we are using, this VMware that which client are providing or software.
Yeah, I'm saying, see, if it is Azure, I've told you what happens in Azure, and for Citrix, I've also told you. But since I'm not an admin of your Citrix account, so I will not be able to tell you whether your VDI is shared or dedicated. You will know. I'm saying uh, user can know. I'm saying you can go to the task manager. In the task manager, I'm saying if you want to know whether it's a shared VDI or whether it's a dedicated VDI that you have, this is a bit out of scope, but then that's okay. So in the task manager, you can click on users tab and you will get to know whether you are the only user connecting to that server, connecting to that machine, or there are other people also who are connected. For example, mine is a dedicated laptop. Right now, only I'm the only user on this laptop.
Yeah,
So that
okay.
way you will find out. Okay.
Okay, thank you. It's helpful. Thank you.
All right. I'm glad that I'm able to answer your questions. Let's move on, guys. So this is how you provision virtual machines in Azure. And as I said, virtual machine is one service along with storage, which constitutes 70 to 80% of your infrastructure in cloud, be it Azure, AWS, GCP cloud. So even though you have nothing to do with virtual machine, because you are primarily focused on Entra, at the end of the day, you should at least know how do I have Entra integrate with virtual machine for authentication and authorization. And for that to work, there are two aspects. One is configuring it from the portal, other is testing it. You can configure it from the portal just by clicking one checkbox. But how will you test it? For that, you need to know how to provision a virtual machine. For that, you need to know how to connect to a virtual machine. For that, you need to know at least the basic operations of a virtual machine. Then only you would want to validate whether the Entra configuration is working as expected. So either you will have somebody from VM team to do it for you, or you will know this yourself. That makes you a sought after person in your team who has very low or minimum dependency on other team members, who typically knows more than what is needed. So be that person in your team who knows more than what is needed. Okay, so that's about virtual machine, guys. Now we did provision one virtual machine. We could not take any break today because this was a lengthy topic and I wanted to complete it in one go. Now we can take a break. Once we resume from break, I would want you to provision some additional virtual machines so that you get a good handle with virtual machine provisioning. And then we will talk about some additional aspects of virtual machines with respect to configuration before we close the session for today. Romil, did you get access from Farhan? Because I don't see your virtual machine. When you provision virtual machine, your virtual machine will be shown here, right along with my virtual machines, because you and I will be using the same account. This is where Farhan has basically created your identity. Let me check. Yeah, so your identity is here, Romil Sharma, and you have been given appropriate access also. If I look at your access, you don't need any access on Entra. You primarily need access on Azure so that you can provision the virtual machine. And that access is here. You have virtual machine contributor access. So with this access, you can provision a virtual machine.
Yes, Raghu.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on. Let me close all of these. All right, so now that we have a virtual machine, and let's understand some basic operations around virtual machine. So let's say, as one of you have asked, now that we have this virtual machine with a specific configuration, which is the size is B2S, which is 2 CPU cores, 4 GB memory. What if I want to increase the size? Because I start with this virtual machine today and I deploy my application. Later on, I realize from monitoring data that my application is experiencing performance issue. And when I look into the data, I could see that machine is running short of resources. Guys, go on mute. Okay, so machine is running short of resources. Now, in that scenario, when the machine is running short of resources, you will basically need to provide more CPU cores and more memory to the machine, depending on what it is running short of. Sometimes, if you're running a database on this machine, then it will require more memory than CPU. If you are running some analytical application on this machine, it requires more CPU than memory. So depending on what it needs, you have the liberty to change the size of a machine at any point in time. Definitely, changing the size is a change in the environment. And for that, you need to raise a change request. It needs to be duly approved by management because changing the size will also implicate commercials. It would involve additional commercials and it would also require a downtime. When you change the size of a machine, it will reboot. So you will need to have application team with you who will gracefully shut down the application, give you some buffer, some window in which you will change the size. So let's say we have taken all that into consideration and we want to change the size of this machine. We want to increase the resources. So how do we increase it? We navigate to the machine and we directly navigate to in the machine, you will find that option here. There is an option with the name size. Just look, you will find it. Yeah. Under availability plus create. See, earlier, I would say a couple of months ago, you would not have these arrows. I'm saying all the options would be available here in this vertical box. You just need to scroll it down to look for the available options. Now they have grouped these options. So sometimes it becomes very difficult to search for a specific capability, and you basically need to uh, I'm say expand these arrows and look for that capability. For example, I want to increase the size. It is under availability plus scale. So I will click on size here, and it will show me the current size of the virtual machine plus all the additional sizes which are available, right? So this is where I can change the size. So these are all the sizes which are available as we speak. Now, the sizes that you will see depend on multiple factors. First, the region that you are in. Not all sizes are available in all the regions. It's like a car. For example, we have Mahindra Thar in India. Probably Mahindra also sells, Mahindra also exports cars to US, but they probably have not the same car, or it is the same car with some additional features because it's a left-hand drive country. It may probably have a different model name. So that's how virtual machine sizes differs from region to region. It also depends on cost. It also depends on hardware, and it also depends on the current available capacity in that region. So it may happen that I may see a different size, you may see a different size in your portal, depending on which region you are in. If you want to see all the sizes, then you can shut down the virtual machine. When you shut down the virtual machine, you will be able to see additional sizes also, right? I see all of these sizes right now in front of me. I can switch to, so right now my machine is in B series. I can go ahead and increase the configuration in the same series, which is right now this is B2S, because the current size will be highlighted. I can make it B2MS, which is this 2 CPU cores, 8 GB RAM, keeping the CPU core as same and increasing the memory. Or I can switch to a different series, which is D series, which is a bit expensive than B series. See, in D series, if I go with a size that gives me, let's say, 2 CPU cores and 7 GB RAM, look at the cost of this size. The cost is 8,502 rupees per month. And the same size in B series, look at the cost. In B series, B2MS, which is 2 CPU core and 1 GB memory extra, is costing me 5,000 rupees. So direct difference of 3,000 rupees. Where exactly does this difference lies? In the hardware, in the backend hardware. That B series is based on AMD processors, D series is based on Intel processors. That's the difference. Okay. So, and it directly affects the performance. So I can change the size. Let's say I want to go with this size, which is DS2 version hyphen underscore V2. I can select the size and I will resize. The moment I will resize, the machine will reboot and it will boot on a different hardware, which is based on Intel. Machine will reboot for sure in both cases, even if I go with the same series with a different size, or if I switch to a different series. In both cases, machine will reboot. So it says, do you want to resize this size? It says if the virtual machine is currently running, changing its size will cause it to be restarted. So I acknowledge this, and now it is changing the size of the virtual machine.
Raghu, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. So I'm saying that changing the size will reboot the machine. And this process typically takes a couple of seconds to maybe a minute, depending. Okay. Sometimes it may take some time, additional time, when Azure is quite busy serving other requests. So machine is size, you can see that it has not even taken 1 minute. Now, if I go back to my machine overview, I will see a different size now. See, it says B2S. If I just refresh this, you will see the next size. Now it's DS2 V2. So obviously the performance of my machine is going to be higher than what it was. So that's how you change the size of the machine, right? You can do both. You can both upsize a machine or downsize a machine. Let's say I go with this size and my monitoring data tells me that the machine is not even 10% utilized, which means I'm overpaying for a system, for a service which is underutilized. So what I can do, I can go ahead and resize it once again. I can go to size and choose a lower size also. For example, this size, DS1 V2, which is one CPU core and 3.5 half, three and a half gig of memory. I can do this also. So you can do both upsize and downsize a virtual machine. Nobody will stop you. Okay. Now, so this is on the size. Let's talk about data. So this machine, you already know that this machine has a disk on it, which is 127 GB disk, which is standard HDD LRS. Locally redundant storage, 3 copies in the same data center with magnetic hardware configured. That's what my disk is. Now, what if I get complaints from my users that the performance is very low? When they are trying to read data from application, it takes time. When they upload some data, it is taking time. Why? Because my machine is using magnetic hardware. The disk is using magnetic hardware. So I propose that we need to upgrade it to SSD. They approve the cost. Now I want to do it. So how do I do it? I will just navigate to that disk, click on it. It will take me to the disk blade. There I click on settings. Then I see an option with the name configuration. Click on this option and the option with the name size plus performance. Click on this option and it will take you to a window wherein you can change the performance of the disk. So right now it is standard SSD. I can make it standard SSD also. It is standard. This is standard SDD. I can make it standard SSD or premium SSD also. Let's say I choose premium SSD. Now at the same time, I can also increase the size of the disk. Right now it is 128 GB. I can make it 256 GB also. However, you cannot change the disk size or performance when the machine is up and running. Because when the machine is running, some processing is happening. Some data is being copied or some data is being read or written. That may corrupt the disk. So in order to change the size of a disk, the machine must be stopped first. So I will first shut down this machine and then I can change the size of the disk on the machine. Resizing the machine doesn't require machine to be shut down because it shut downs the machine as part of the process. Changing the size of a disk requires machine to be shut down first. Otherwise, there could be a data loss. And Azure is very stringent when it comes to customer experience. So we are changing the size now. So machine is getting stopped. When the machine stops, you can stop the machine in two ways. You can, if you're connected to the machine, from inside the OS, you can click on start button and shut down the machine, or you can also stop the machine from Azure portal. Now understand one thing on the costing part. Stopping the VM from inside OS, stopping the VM from Azure portal. If you stop the VM from inside OS, on Azure portal, the VM status will be shown as stopped. If you stop the VM from Azure portal, on Azure portal, the status of the VM will change to stopped reallocated. The difference is in the first approach, you will continue to get charged from Azure for VM billing. In the first option, Azure will continue to charge you. In the second option, Azure will stop billing for compute. When I say compute, vCPU plus memory. That's the difference. Remember this difference, guys. So if you stop it from inside the VM, you will continue to get charged from Azure. And if you stop it from Azure portal, Azure will stop charging you for compute, which is CPU and memory. Yes, you will continue to get charged for storage and network because those are separate services. So you should always stop the VM from Azure portal, not from inside the VM. Now, why Azure stop charging you? Because Azure deallocates the CPU and memory and assign it to some other customer or release it to the hardware pool once again. When you start the VM, it will once again assign you that CPU and memory so that your VM can get started. So this has direct implication on cost. So make sure that you shut down the VM from Azure portal, not from inside the VM. Are you with me on this?
Yes, I do.
Okay, next. Now that the VM is stopped, I'll show you how do we. It is still deallocating. Okay, so it is still deallocating. Sometimes it is nothing but synchronization issue. I'll go back and do the same activity, which is changing the disk size and configuration. So I click on the disk, then navigate to size plus performance. Right now it is standard SDD. I select premium SSD and it is 128 GB. I select 256 GB. So it is still not allowing me, which means the machine is still shutting down. And unless the machine is 100% shut down, I will not be able to do that. Okay, so while the machine is getting shut down, let's talk about the networking part. Okay, probably it's working now. No. So machine is still shutting down basically. Sometimes when you shut down the machine from Azure portal, it goes into some loop because of which it takes time. And there is hardly anything that you can do here. You just need to wait and watch. Okay, so while this machine is shutting down, let's talk about networking. Now, this machine has two types of IP addresses on it, public IP and private IP. This is the private IP address of my machine. And if I want, sorry, this is the public IP address of my machine. If I want to see private IP, it is here. So my machine has two IPs, private IP. This private IP address is coming from the virtual network address space, and public IP address is coming from Azure pool of public IPs, which I selected while provisioning the machine. Let's say, so where exactly do you find these public IPs and private IPs? You click on networking. In networking settings, you will see the network interface card, which is attached to the machine. This is the network interface card, which is Raghuveer-1842. So what Azure does, when it creates a network interface card, it uses the machine name and then it adds some suffix in the name of numerals. So that's the network interface card, which is attached to my machine, which is currently holding both public and private IP. And if I want to make changes to those IPs, let's say I want to, so right now my private IP is basically dynamic. And if I want to make it static, we did talk about dynamic and static IPs in networking topic. So if I want to make it static, then I will select static. And if I want to get rid of public IP, let's say I don't want public IP on my machine. I have created a VPN tunnel from my network to Azure. So I will now be taking remote or SSH of my machine over VPN tunnel. In that case, on the same window where you see both public and private IP, you can uncheck this box. That box associate public IP. The moment you uncheck this box and save it, machine will lose public IP and any additional configuration that you have done, which is you have changed the allocation, IP address allocation from dynamic to static, that will happen. So your machine will retain this private IP on it all the time. That's the IP address part that you need to be aware of. Any question on this, guys? On the IP address management with respect to changing the IP address allocation from dynamic to static and vice versa, and assigning or associating or dissociating public IP. Because the same checkbox, if machine doesn't have a public IP, you come back to the same window here, and under public IP, the public IP field, the box will be blank and you will see a checkbox. So click on the checkbox and then select a public IP if you already have, or you can create a public IP here itself. That's what the public IP part is. Private IP you see here. Okay, let's see whether the machine is stopped now. No, machine has gone into the reboot cycle. So once this happens, as you know, to expedite this process, what we do. Okay, so we actually can't do anything here because the stop button is not available. Sometimes what happens, machine source deallocating and the stop button is also available. So what we do, we enforce the stop operation once again. But since that button is not available, there is absolutely nothing that I can do right now other than waiting. Okay, now it's done. You can see status is now stop deallocated. So now that the status changes to stop deallocated, I can make disk related configuration changes. I can click on size plus performance and I can go ahead and change the performance from standard to premium and change the size from 128 to 256 GB. And you can see save button is now available. Earlier it was not. So now I can update the disk. So that way you can increase the size of the disk and you can also change the performance from standard to premium. Now, once that part is done, we will try to do the reverse of it, which is, let's say you provision a virtual machine with premium SSD of 1 terabyte space. And later on, you realize that you're not even occupying 10% of that space, but you're paying to Microsoft for 1 terabyte storage every month. So you want to resize it. You want to change the size of it and probably shrink it to 128 GB. So how do we do that? And also from premium, you want to make it standard HDD because you're not using it. So this part is done. We'll refresh the portal. And let's see the other way around. Now, when I come back to the screen, now the current status is my virtual machine OS disk is configured with premium SSD performance and it is of 256 GB of size. Now I want to change the size. I want to reduce it because my consumption of the disk is not even 10%. So I probably want to do it 32 GB. And I want to change the performance from premium to standard once again. So let's do one by one. So we will first change the performance, which is premium to standard. Now look at the bottom. When I'm trying to change the performance from premium to standard, nobody is stopping me. I have this save button highlighted. However, the moment I try to change the size from 256 GB to 128 GB, the lower size, it gives me a warning and the save button is faded now. And it says reducing disk size is not supported in Azure to prevent data loss. Remember this word. Remember this statement. Last night I was taking an interview of a person for Azure L2 role. I asked the same question with the same scenario that you recently provisioned a virtual machine based on a ServiceNow request with so and so configuration. Now that the management has decided change their plan, they don't want to use that virtual machine. So they basically want you to delete it. And at the same time, just to complicate the question, at the same time, you receive another request for a lower configuration virtual machine. What would you do? Would you provision a new virtual machine or would you just use your existing virtual machine and change the configuration? So he picked up the second option, which was right. Instead of creating new one, just use the existing one and change the configuration. But he was wrong in his approach when he said that because my question was that the machine has 1 terabyte of disk. Now the new request only needs 128 GB of OS disk. And he said that, yes, it is very much doable. I'll go to this place and I'll go ahead and do it. And that very moment he was rejected. So these are very basic things. Now you will say that we don't need to bother about it. We are Entra people. Similarly, in Entra also you need to have very strong concepts, strong foundation, and that you will realize once we start with Entra from next week, you will realize that there were a couple of things that you were really not aware of, or you never thought around, or you had misinformation about it. What if you were doing it, you could have misconfigured it. So basics and foundation is very important in technology. When you have good basics and foundation, it will always help you in the long run. So somebody who has 8 years of experience with Microsoft Azure infrastructure support got wrong on this question, which was very basic question. So remember always, this is the thumb rule. You cannot shrink the storage in Azure, be it a virtual machine, be it any storage service. You can always expand it. No, shrinking is not allowed. Why? Shrinking may result in data loss, right? So what is my workaround? Let's say you are right that we cannot do it, but my requirement is also legitimate, right? I don't want to pay for 1 TB of disk while I'm not even using 10 GB of data on it. So what should be the solution? Any participant? What should be the solution here? How can I reduce the cost and at the same time take care and at the same time don't lose my data? What do you think? Any participant? Nobody? No idea? Naeem, Monisha, Aditya,
Can you please repeat once again?
did you understand the roadblock that we are currently with? That we are not able to we are not able to shrink the size of the disk, and we are, and Microsoft is unnecessarily charging us for a larger storage, which we are not actually using. So what is my workaround here? How can I save my data and at the same time save cost of my employer?
Uh,
Okay. What we will do, we will attach an additional disk of expected size, whatever size we need. Let's say, you need a 30 GB of disk. So you will attach an additional disk of 30 GB to this machine, and then you will log into the machine. And from inside the machine, you will copy all the data from this 128 GB disk to 38 GB disk, right? Once all the data is copied, you verify that yes, you have all the data. Then you come back to this portal and detach this disk from the machine and delete it. So it's a workaround. That way, you have saved the cost and you have also met uh, you have also resolved the service request from your customer who asked you to shrink the disk. So you will not shrink it. You would rather create a lower size disk, attach it to the VM, copy all the data, and then delete the existing disk once you are 100% sure that you have all the data copied to another disk. That's the solution. Is everyone with me on this? Yes, no, maybe? Okay. By 1 o'clock, I don't know what happens to you guys. See, I am running with the same level of energy that I was with this morning, and I will have the same level of energy till 6 o'clock in the evening because I will have another batch. Okay. So what is the agenda for tomorrow? We are done with virtual machines. There are some additional activities which are possible through virtual machines. You can explore them yourself, or you can watch my recorded session on YouTube, wherein I am covering some additional activities related to virtual machines, disk, IP addresses, and other aspects of it. You can follow along with the recording, practice it yourself, and if you come across any issue, take a screenshot, make a note of it, discuss it with me tomorrow when we resume the session in the morning. However, the agenda for tomorrow will be, we will be focusing on our last topic when it comes to the core service, which is logging, monitoring, and auditing. That is the agenda for tomorrow. So please make sure that you join the session on time tomorrow. If we are done with this topic beforehand, we will close the session. I will not hold you until 1 o'clock. Take my words for it, but we will need to make sure that we complete this topic. So that's the topic for tomorrow. Now, how can you save cost? Save cost and manage with USD $100. Make sure to stop the virtual machine. If you are creating more virtual machines to get a good comfort level with virtual machines provisioning in Azure, please make sure that you delete additional virtual machines. You should not have more than one virtual machine in your account at any point in time. Even if you want, you can delete this one virtual machine also today, because when we start with Entra ID, I will have you create a virtual machine that will be used for configuring Active Directory domain services for Entra related topics. So that point in time, you need the virtual machine. So I leave that decision to you, whether you want to uh, stop the virtual machine and keep it there, or you want to delete the virtual machines, this one or additional. And most important thing, on the storage, please make sure that the virtual machine OS disk and any additional data disk that you have used must be configured with standard HDD. For example, I have just changed the virtual machine disk performance from standard to premium. So this will cost me a lot of money. But I'm going to delete this virtual machine. Why? Because I already have one virtual machine that I can reuse, or it hardly takes 3 to 5 minutes to provision a new virtual machine. So I would provision that virtual machine when the right time comes, and that also helps me to go through all the options once again and keep me up to date with what is changing in Azure space. So I'm deleting this virtual machine. If you are retaining your virtual machine for any reason, please make sure that you check the you check the disk performance. It should not be premium, because if it is premium, then every day it would incur $2 to $3 of cost only for the storage. And I don't want you to end up spending $100 before this training is over. So please make sure that you keep a track of the cost, either by retaining the virtual machine with lower configuration